Hello. Tonight, I invite you to leave your modern bed behind. Let the city lights fade into a distant blur. You and we are stepping into a hidden world. A world where moonlight slips over golden rooftops, where silk curtains whisper secrets, and where power and pleasure dance together like two shadows on a lonely wall. Imagine you are standing at the edge of an ancient courtyard. The air is heavy with the scent of sandalwood and rain-damp stone. You feel the chill of midnight against your skin, but battles of a different kind, battles fought in hushed voices, under lantern light, between trembling hands and tired sighs. Yet your heart beats with a quiet curiosity. Before you rise walls so high, they seem to scrape the stars, painted in crimson. At its heart lay the Emperor's Forbidden's pleasure palace, a labyrinth of chambers designed not for statecraft, but for escape. You pass a silent courtyard, where lotus leaves tremble in a shallow pond. Somewhere far away, a pipa plays a gentle lament, its notes drifting like fallen petals across the night air. A place where silk rustled like the softest confession, where gold reflected trembling candlelight, and where the promise of warmth always came with the price of power lost. She has waited since the sun fell beyond the horizon, her face painted carefully, her hair adorned with delicate hairpins shaped like phoenix wings. Each breath she takes is shallow, almost as if she fears the sound might scare away her one chance at being chosen. Tax collectors squeeze villages dry, famine creeps across provinces like a hungry ghost, and barbarian forces threaten distant borders. But inside, music and laughter drown out all warnings. The gardens bloom with moonflowers, but beneath the blossoms lie tears shed in silence. In these halls, love is currency, loyalty is a performance, and every embrace is shadowed by the weight of duty betrayed. Ministers try to speak, but their voices are snuffed like candle flames. Favored concubines plot in soft voices, promising each other secrets they will never keep. Outside these walls, history sharpens its knives, waiting for the final act. Instead, we will wander deeper, past the embroidered curtains, past the moonlit ponds, past the trembling hands reaching for an absent future. We will see the Emperor not as a god, but as a man, frightened, flawed, and fatally human. Inside, the Emperor lies awake at dawn, listening to the echo of goat bells, and wondering whether he has already lost everything worth keeping. 1,000 dreams are born here each night, and 1,000 more are buried before dawn. And gold, guarded by silent soldiers whose eyes never truly sleep. Beautiful women perform slow dances, their sleeves like flowing rivers, their eyes never quite meeting yours. The Emperor watches from a jade throne, his mind adrift somewhere between desire and dread. The wine is endless. The drums beat slow and heavy, echoing the tired pulse of a dynasty that forgets how to breathe. You watch the Emperor slip away into a hidden passage, followed by a woman whose smile does not reach her eyes. You hear the slow, mournful melody drifting through the courtyard, a song about a moon that never stays, a love that always fades. She left her family years ago, chosen for her beauty or her quiet charm. It is a mirror reflecting all the fears a ruler tries to outrun. The fear of mortality, of betrayal, of losing the mandate of heaven. In the Emperor's mind, each new face offers a promise of immortality, each fleeting touch a momentary escape from the Empire's heavy crown. Perhaps she was 14, her hands still clumsy from childhood chores. Perhaps she wept the first night, alone under an embroidered quilt, missing the smell of her mother's kitchen or the warmth of a younger sibling's hand. The scholars hunched over ink-stained scrolls. They knew an emperor as the Son of Heaven, a divine being who carried the mandate to rule all under heaven. But for many, that bell never comes. Days turn into months, months into years. Outside, dynasties rise and fall, but inside, time stands still in a prison draped with golden threads. They chased 1,000 fleeting pleasures as if each night might be their last. They surrounded themselves with an ocean of concubines, each a droplet of desire, each a quiet echo of a life they could never fully hold. They imagined him majestic, wise, his mind ever busy with the worries of an empire. But inside these walls, reality was much softer and much darker. To the world, he is a demigod. But in truth, he is a lonely boy lost in a forest of silk and perfume. He is a man running from responsibility, drowning in pleasure because he fears the silence of his own thoughts. These walls hold stories no royal decree can erase. They are not stories of conquests, not victories on distant battlefields. Tonight, you will become a phantom wandering these sacred halls. You will hear soft laughter echoing through empty corridors, see the shimmering shadows of dancers who once spun for a single glance from an emperor. You will taste the loneliness that dripped into every ornate cup of wine, the longing that haunted each embroidered pillow. The world outside these walls, the farmers toiling in flooded rice paddies, the merchants arguing at dusty markets. Behind the shimmering silk screens and jade carvings, emperors often hid not only from their enemies, but from themselves. In ancient China, the imperial palace was a living organism. It breathed in whispers and exhaled secrets. Imagine stepping through a moonlit archway. Your footsteps are hushed, swallowed by the cool marble. You turn a corner and see them, rows of doors, each leading to a chamber where a girl waits in quiet anticipation. You feel her loneliness, an ache that runs deeper than any wound. And now she sits in candlelight, staring at the door, hoping to hear the faint jingle of a goat's bell, a sign that the emperor, as bizarre, goat-drawn carriage has stopped at her chamber tonight. Imagine an emperor who spends his days not at council meetings, but wandering these endless corridors, guided by goats, deciding each night's companion by chance rather than affection. You walk deeper, passing moon gates carved with dragons and phoenixes, symbols of cosmic balance. Yet here, the balance is gone. The empire outside grows restless. At a banquet hall, tables groan under plates of roasted peacock and sweet lotus pastries. Imagine the smell of the palace, a sharp mix of incense, sweat, and aged silk. In the quiet corners, eunuchs whisper deals, slipping bribes into sleeves lined with embroidered cranes. Tonight, you stand as a ghost among them. You feel each pulse of longing, each echo of regret. The imperial pleasure palace is not merely a place of indulgence. And yet, the deeper he falls into this sea of silken shadows, the further he drifts from the shore of duty. Tonight, you and I will not judge him. Are you ready? Take a deep breath. Let the scent of sandalwood fill your lungs. The lanterns are lit, the echoes are calling. Let's begin. Imagine that tonight, instead of closing your eyes to drift into sleep, you slip them open to a different world. A world inside, the golden heart of an imperial palace where dreams and nightmares share the same silken pillow. We enter a corridor so long, it disappears into shadow. Along the walls hang delicate paintings of plum blossoms, cranes, and winding dragons, each stroke a silent guardian of secrets never meant for the world beyond. You rise slowly from your modern bed, your feet touching a cold, polished stone floor. You hear distant echoes, the soft patter of silk slippers in moonlit hallways, the slow exhale of a caged crane perched in a lacquered aviary. Step with me now, past the carved jade screens and heavy brocade curtains. At the far end, a door opens without a sound. A figure slips through, her head lowered, hands clasped in front of her embroidered sash. Wait for the emperor's fleeting glance. Wait for a knock on the door at midnight. Wait for a destiny that might never arrive. The morning bell echoes faintly, followed by the rustling of maids preparing water for washing. You hear the soft clink of porcelain basins, the hush of whispered prayers for luck. She moves like a drifting cloud, graceful, tentative, almost unreal. You follow her into her chamber. There, hundreds of women gather like a vast, silent forest. Their eyes avoid one another, yet their hearts listen for every rustle of silk, every tremor in the air. In this forest, friendship is as fragile as a plum blossom in winter. Alliances form and dissolve over the faintest rumor of favor. First, the thin white underrobe, then the tighter silk tunic, its sleeves stiff with embroidery. Yet each bite tastes the same, quiet resignation. A name is read aloud, a name that cuts through the hushed crowd like a falling petal. You wander along narrow paths lined with rockeries and twisted pine trees. Butterflies drift lazily among the azaleas. Koi fish flash beneath the pond's murky surface like forgotten wishes. You reach out to touch a flowering branch, only to remember the unspoken rule. Nothing belongs to you, not even this moment of fleeting beauty. Some claim a single drop on the lips might win the emperor's favor. Others say it only hastens heartbreak. One woman gasps. Another sways slightly, her hope breaking like porcelain. Imagine a moonlit night when two concubines sit together on a carved stone bench, sharing roasted chestnuts and stories of their village festivals. Their hair, once as dark as ink, shows silver threads. They spend their days tending small potted orchids, reading faded scrolls, or teaching new arrivals how to move, how to speak, how to dream without truly dreaming. They become living ghosts, wandering the palace in embroidered slippers that no longer fit their tired feet. Their skin loses its luster. Their eyes hold a distant glaze. The emperor no longer visits, if he ever did at all. Their laughter is hushed, but real. Or a morning when a young maid weaves a silk ribbon into your hair, her hands warm, her smile like a tiny lantern against the endless gloom. There, they watch the moon's reflection tremble on the water surface and whisper old folk songs from their childhood. Their voices are soft as moth wings, weaving together in a fragile tapestry of shared sorrow. She lies awake, listening for the softest creak at her door, for the jingle of a goat bell that may never come. Red lanterns sway from lacquered beams, their glow soft as a lover's breath. But here, the garden still blooms, the silk still shimmers, the emperor's goats still choose their nightly path. Somewhere, a court musician begins a melancholy tune on a guqin, its low notes echoing across the courtyard, like the heartbeat of a restless ghost. Over that, the long flowing robe of imperial blue or rose red, colors chosen not by you, but by the court's strict hierarchy. Each chamber is a tiny universe, where 1,000 stories bloom unseen, where every sigh carries the weight of a lifetime of waiting. One dabs perfume behind her ears, another recites lines from an ancient love poem, a third hums a lullaby her mother sang long before she was brought to this gilded prison. Each stitch, each fold, a reminder of your place, not just in the palace, but in the universe. It is the tremor in a voice reciting an old poem to the night sky. It is the quiet, endless hope that maybe tomorrow, just maybe, the door will finally open. Her hair, dark and heavy, is pinned with phoenix-shaped ornaments. The more beautiful you are, the more carefully you must guard your every glance, every gesture, for fear of attracting envy or suspicion. A single whispered accusation of witchcraft, of hidden affairs, of plotting against the emperor can mean banishment or worse. Or perhaps tonight, like so many other nights, she will wait in vain. Hairpins of jade, pearls, or gold weigh upon your scalp, a silent crown for a queen who may never rule over anything beyond her own loneliness. As she carefully adjusts them, her fingers tremble ever so slightly. Inside, a single lantern glows with a soft, golden warmth, casting long shadows that sway gently with each movement. You spend your hours embroidering lotus flowers onto handkerchiefs. You may never gift practicing poems about moonlit gardens. No one will ever read, or plucking the strings of a pipa until your fingers ache and your heart feels like a hollow gourd. The room smells of jasmine oil and candle wax, a scent that clings to your skin as you breathe it in. In the palace gardens, cicadas hum their endless song of longing. The lotus pond shivers under a passing breeze, petals drifting like soft sighs on the water's surface. In the corner, a small table holds an inkstone, a delicate brush, and half-finished poems written to no one, read by no one. The girl kneels before a bronze mirror. She studies her own reflection, a face too young to know the weight of duty, yet already marked by years of waiting. Tonight, she might be chosen. Beyond the gates guarded by silent soldiers, beyond the world of ministers and scholars, lay this hidden empire of silk and shadow. It was both a sanctuary and a prison, a labyrinth of painted halls and echoing courtyards. Outside, the moon slides across the sky, pale and indifferent. The imperial harem, the so-called inner palace, was a kingdom within a kingdom. Here, thousands of young women shared a single fate: to wait. Imagine waking every morning to the same pale ceiling, the same embroidered quilt heavy with floral patterns, the same silent courtyard beyond the lattice window. You dress slowly, each layer an armor of duty. Your hair must be arranged perfectly, every strand smoothed into place. Once dressed, you move into the main hall of the harem. Imagine standing among them, your gaze fixed on the polished floor, listening to the sound of footsteps approaching, the eunuchs who bear the emperor's nightly summons. Tonight, it might be your turn, but more often than not, it isn't. For those not chosen, the day stretches on like an endless silk scroll. Meals arrive in carved wooden trays, steamed buns shaped like chrysanthemums, rice porridge flavored with tiny petals, pickled vegetables arranged like a miniature landscape. The gardens, though beautiful, become a maze of silent regrets. In the evenings, the inner palace transforms into a shadow play. Inside, some women still hold on to small rituals of hope. There are rumors of love potions, rare elixirs made from crushed peony petals and deer musk, whispered about in trembling voices late at night. Among these women, beauty is not a blessing. It is a curse sharpened by time. And yet, for all this suffering, there are still moments of softness. These fleeting kindnesses are the true treasures of the harem, stolen sparks of warmth in an ocean of cold. As months turn into years, some women age before their time. For them, life becomes a quiet twilight. Sometimes, late at night, they gather at the moon gate, an arched doorway overlooking the imperial lake. Beyond the walls, the empire may be crumbling. Floods devastate farmlands, rebellions ignite in border provinces, tax collectors bleed villages dry, and inside each chamber, a single candle flickers beside a young woman's bed, casting shadows that dance like silent prayers. The palace is a gilded cage, yes, but it is also a labyrinth of dreams that refuse to die. And you, walking quietly through these echoing halls tonight, feel it all. The ache of longing, the gentle defiance of whispered laughter, the warmth of a fleeting kindness shared between two strangers. In this world, love is not a rose offered beneath a moonlit balcony. It is a jasmine flower pressed between pages of an unwritten letter. As dawn breaks, the hush of night gives way to a different kind of silence, the heavy, resigned quiet of a world waking to duty rather than joy. A distant drum echoes beyond the palace walls, marking the first watch of the morning. In the courtyard, a young eunuch sweeps fallen magnolia petals into neat piles. Through an open doorway, you glimpse a young woman sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, her face turned toward a tiny bonsai pine. She holds a brush and a thin sheet of rice paper. Each stroke is deliberate, echoing the rhythm of her breath. Inhale, draw the branch. Exhale, draw the tiny needle-like leaves. He glances up at the high eaves where doves roost, their coos of fragile music against the morning gloom. In these stolen moments, the world beyond the walls recedes. Their movements are precise, mechanical, a choreography of submission perfected over years. A misstep is corrected instantly by a stern matron, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. There is no emperor, no goat-drawn carriage, no sharp whispers in the dark. Yet behind each bowed head, a different story flickers. A girl who once loved to climb mulberry trees, another who sang in moonlit village festivals, a third who used to run barefoot through golden fields. Only the quiet murmur of ink sliding across paper, the scent of pine resin, and the slow unfolding of a private universe. The women file in, each step as quiet as a breath. Chopsticks must be held at a perfect angle. No slurping of broth, no sudden laughter. Each woman eats as though 1,000 eyes are watching, because in a way, they always are. You can almost hear the sigh of the palace walls, as if the very stones understand the endless longing contained within. The rain washes dust from the mossy courtyards, gathers in silent pools beneath ornamental bridges. Lanterns flicker in the corridors, their flames trembling like hearts caught between hope and despair. In the dining hall, they sit in rows, heads lowered. The scent of sandalwood coils into the air, mingling with a distant echo of temple bells. Maids help the concubines into their night robes, layers of gauzy silk, soft as a whisper against the skin. Somewhere, a concubine weeps into her sleeve, her sobs muffled to avoid punishment. She watches the rain slide down the leaves of a persimmon tree, her eyes reflecting 1,000 unspoken questions. Will she ever see her mother again? Will she ever feel the warmth of a lover's hand, unburdened by duty or fear? It is in the secret poems slipped under a pillow, the smile shared behind a fan, the silent promise exchanged in a fleeting glance. The emperor may believe he owns them, their beauty, their youth, their dreams, but in these quiet hours, they belong only to themselves, however briefly. And yet, even here, they find ways to survive, to create small sanctuaries of their own. Will she ever hear her name spoken with tenderness, rather than as a summons? A concubine sits beside it, her fingers hesitating above the frets. The song she begins is slow, melancholic, each note hanging in the air like dew on bamboo leaves. She dreams of a time before silk and pearls, before titles and rankings, before her identity was reduced to a number on a eunuch's roster. It is a song about departure, about waiting for a letter that never arrives. Bowls of steamed millet, boiled greens, and salted radish are placed before them. Others clutch small talismans, jade pendants carved with protective verses, silk pouches filled with dried chrysanthemum petals. Occasionally, there is a delicacy, a sweet lotus seed bun, a rare sliver of duck breast, gifts from the emperor's kitchen meant to remind them of his presence, his distant benevolence. The light is pale, filtering through pearl lattice windows like milk poured over cold stones. Inside, maids begin to move quietly, each step rehearsed to avoid any sound that might disturb the thin thread of sleep clinging to the concubines. One shuffles painted cards marked with delicate lotus symbols, a game of chance and patience. Others compose poetry in flowing, careful calligraphy, verses about distant mountains, migrating cranes, the fleeting fragrance of plum blossoms. Each poem a quiet rebellion, each stitch a whispered prayer. The other laughs softly, her voice husky from disuse. They have learned to survive by inventing small rituals, tiny games to fill the hours between sunrise and sunset. You find yourself walking down a side corridor, your fingers trailing along the cool stone. She paints not for an audience, but for herself. Nearby, another concubine kneels by a basin of warm water, her hands red and raw. She scrubs the same piece of silk over and over, as if by washing it clean, she might wash away the ache of her own endless waiting. The water grows cloudy, swirling with soap and regret. Not far away, in a shaded alcove, two older women sit facing each other over a small lacquered table. Sometimes, a passing breeze carries the faintest notes of a flute, played somewhere deep in the gardens. Its song is like a memory from a dream, sweet, echoing forever just out of reach. By midday, the air thickens with humidity. In the main hall, a group of concubines practices formal greetings and ceremonial bows. In this dance, the women are not individuals. They are petals on the same branch, each indistinguishable from the next. All those lives, all those bright, unruly sparks, now hidden beneath layers of silk and obedience. Gong sounds in the courtyard, calling for the midday meal. The reality, though, is far from tender. Every bite is a test of decorum. When the meal ends, they return to their quarters, bellies full but hearts still empty. The long afternoon stretches ahead like an endless corridor. Some spend the hours embroidering peony blossoms onto silk handkerchiefs. There are music lessons, too. A pipa rests on a lacquered stand in one chamber, its strings gleaming like moonlit rivers. Outside, the sky darkens with the approach of rain. A sudden downpour begins, drumming on the curved roof tiles. Through a window, you see a young woman standing alone, her forehead pressed against the lattice. These questions swirl around her like autumn leaves in the wind, each one a small wound that never quite heals. In the evening, incense is lit in each chamber. Some women brush their hair 100 times before bed, each stroke an incantation for beauty, for favor, for a future beyond the cage. In the deepest part of the night, when even the guards doze against their spears, a quiet sadness settles over the palace like morning mist. Elsewhere, another dreams of home. The smell of rice fields after rain, the laughter of siblings playing in the yard, the crackling warmth of a kitchen hearth. As you walk these halls tonight, you can almost feel each fragile heartbeat echoing in the air. Their rebellion is subtle, hidden beneath layers of etiquette and embroidered robes. They live in a world gilded with moonlight and sorrow, where love is a rumor and freedom is a forbidden dream. They are artists painting plum blossoms in moonlight, poets capturing fleeting starlight on rice paper, musicians coaxing songs from strings that echo across the centuries. In these women's hands, silence becomes a language, longing becomes a thread, and waiting becomes an art form. Beyond the moonlit corridors, the emperor's quarters glow with soft lantern light, a place at once near and impossibly distant. Tonight, as every night, a few names are read aloud in a hushed, almost ceremonial voice by the head eunuch. Those chosen to attend the emperor at evening feel a mix of triumph and terror coursing through their veins. Imagine it. Your heart stutters as your name is called. Your hands tremble against your silk robe, your pulse echoing in your ears like a distant drum. Others dread it, fearing the harsh eyes of jealous rivals and the endless intrigues that swirl around the emperor's favor. You do not walk to him. You are carried, sometimes wrapped in fine blankets, as a symbol of being a living gift. You are stripped of outer garments and presented like a rare offering on an altar. But beyond the fear and the ceremony, there is an ancient loneliness in these meetings, a dance where both dancer and audience are imprisoned. Speak only when asked, one whispers, adjusting a girl's hairpin. Your eyes must be soft, your lips curved just enough. Never show too much hunger for his gaze. Remember, even your breath can be a weapon. Some women dream of this summons for years, seeing it as a path to power or the only possible escape from obscurity. The pieces glide across the lacquered surface like shadows slipping across a moonlit lake. When you arrive at his chamber, incense smoke curls around your ankles like ghostly fingers. Those left behind lie in their cold beds, listening to the rain or the scurrying footsteps of night guards. They imagine the warmth of the emperor's hand, the scent of rare oils rubbed into his hair, the faint whisper of secrets shared only in the dark. The older concubines, who have long ceased to be summoned, hold court in secluded wings. Every fluttering fan, every lifted sleeve, every demure glance is an act, each woman performing an opera with no words. Each concubine glides forward, offering her cup with the precise bow drilled into her since arrival. The emperor rarely attends these gatherings. His absence hangs in the air like an unspoken accusation. Her petals sigh beneath the stars, longing for a touch that never comes. In this shared hush, they remember the lives they left behind, the girls they once were. It stirs forgotten memories, the call of cicadas on a summer night, the warmth of a grandmother's lap, the rhythm of village drums at harvest festivals. The concubines drift back to their rooms, skirts brushing the floor like fallen petals in the wake of a vanished spring. In these rare, unguarded intervals, they are not concubines, but daughters, sisters, dreamers. Others lower their eyes, focusing on the swirling patterns in their tea to avoid the dangerous currents of his gaze. They are the keepers of stories and secrets, queens of invisible networks. In the hush of returning steps, new rumors begin to sprout like wild mushrooms in damp earth. Lanterns glow dimmer, and the soft rustle of silk blankets becomes a lullaby. Somewhere, a maid hums a folk tune, her voice a fragile bridge between centuries. By candlelight, their voices weave soft threads into the heavy air. The merchants dream of silver, the scholars of immortal verses, the farmers of bountiful harvests. Another might carve a tiny mark on the underside of her lacquered pillow, a calendar of private griefs and stolen hopes. It pauses near a lotus pond, watching the koi glide beneath the surface, their movements smooth and oblivious to the world above. He moves like a distant constellation, his presence too blinding to look at directly, yet impossible to ignore. But in these fragile rebellions, in poems unsent, songs unsung, glances unreturned, dreams come and go in flickering waves. A mother's distant voice, a festival lantern floating up into an ink-black sky, the hollow echo of a name once shouted across fields, now lost beneath the endless silken hush. Did she smile at him? Did she displease him? Will she carry an heir? By dawn, the chosen concubines are escorted back, faces blank as moonlit ponds. These questions fuel a dangerous ecosystem of alliances and rivalries. Every morning, alliances shift like silk in a breeze. Today's confidant might become tomorrow's betrayer. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the harem, a different kind of power pulses quietly. They guide the younger women in etiquette, in the subtle arts of influence and survival. There is a chessboard set between two of these older concubines. Each move is slow, meditative. I heard she wept after the emperor left, one says, moving her rook. And yet tomorrow she will boast of his affection, replies the other, sliding a bishop forward. This game is not just a pastime. It is practice for the larger, silent war raging beneath embroidered silk and hushed corridors. At sunset, the entire harem gathers in the main hall for the evening tea ceremony, an event less about tea and more about spectacle. On the rare occasions he does appear, the hall transforms into a living stage. When he enters, there is a sharp, collective inhale, a breath shared by hundreds of souls who have waited endlessly for this moment. Some gaze at him as if he holds the keys to their destiny. Later, after he departs, the hall empties like a tide receding from shore. On certain nights, the older concubines gather in secret to recite poetry. One recites a verse. A lotus blooms in the hidden pond, unseen by moon or sun. Silence follows, a silence deeper than sleep, more tender than any embrace. A breeze flutters through the screens, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine. For a moment, each woman feels herself dissolve, her heavy robes turning into mist, her rigid spine softening into morning dew. The night deepens, and the palace settles into its breathing. A cat slips silently across the courtyard stones, its eyes two pale moons in the dark. The cat's quiet presence mirrors the concubine's own existence. Watchful, restless, alive only in small, hidden ways. Hours stretch like the shadow of a crane on morning mist. In this hush, secrets blossom like nocturnal flowers, delicate, fragrant, unseen by the emperor's sharp eyes or the eunuch's watchful gaze. A concubine might press a note into a crack in the wall, a line of poetry meant for no one, or perhaps for the moon itself. Here, in the gilded cage of the imperial harem, life is not measured in years or favors. Outside, the city sleeps beneath a blanket of rain. But within these walls, the concubines dream only of the moment their hearts might beat freely again, even if just for the span of a single breath. As dawn approaches, the heavy veil of night begins to lift from the palace rooftops, revealing the glimmer of morning dew on jade tiles. In the harem, the first to stir are not the concubines, but the maids and eunuchs. They move like ghosts, lighting braziers, sweeping polished floors with silent, practiced grace. Their first thoughts are not of dreams, but of survival. How to navigate yet another day within this labyrinth of rivalries and silent wars. Hot water is carried in wide ceramic basins, steam rising in gentle clouds that fade into the cool dawn air. The concubines wake slowly, stretching as if emerging from chrysalis cocoons. From above, the scene resembles a garden in early spring, colorful, delicate, and painfully transient. The maids comb their hair into elaborate styles. Every pin and twist a coded signal of rank, recent favor, or whispered alliances. In the reflective bronze mirrors, each woman studies her own face with clinical precision, hunting for signs of age, fatigue, or hints of fading beauty. For some, each new wrinkle feels like the echo of a bell tolling far in the distance, a warning that time is slipping away, and with it, the only currency they possess. Perhaps they imagine the world that lies outside. Markets alive with the scent of roasted chestnuts, rivers carrying lanterns downstream during festivals, families sharing bowls of rice under simple thatched roofs. Instead, each woman eats mechanically, aware that even the tiniest indulgence could be twisted into rumor. She is growing too plump, or she lacks discipline. After grooming, the concubines gather in the courtyard, a living tapestry of embroidered silk and hushed voices. Every word, every giggle, every small gesture is loaded with strategy, an invitation to an alliance or a declaration of silent battle. They move in small groups, glancing cautiously at one another beneath lowered lashes. A few stand apart, their eyes fixed on the palace gates beyond the courtyard walls. Perhaps they might leave behind a poem, a song, or a single, graceful movement that lingers in someone's memory, even if only for a fleeting moment. Perhaps they remember their own past lives, a mother calling them home as the sky blushed pink, a father wiping dust from his hands after a long day in the fields, a small dog barking with unfiltered joy. But inside these walls, even the simplest memory can feel like an act of defiance, a gentle rebellion against the emperor's total claim over their bodies and destinies. When the morning meal is served, there is no joy in the delicate porcelain bowls of rice gruel, pickled vegetables, or sweet lotus buns. Eating is no longer nourishment. It is another performance in the long, endless opera of survival. In her mind, calculations unfold like the petals of a midnight lotus. If she can intercept the right message, if she can whisper to the right eunuch, shadows stretch across the marble courtyards. And in these liminal spaces, small tragedies unfold unseen. Perhaps tomorrow she will stand closer to power, or at least further from oblivion. The message might contain an invitation, a veiled threat, or a plea for mercy from a concubine on the brink of disgrace. Later, lessons in poetry, music, and calligraphy resume, skills meant to cultivate elegance and charm, to transform each concubine into an ethereal creature worthy of the emperor's passing attention. A favored consort receives news of her family has misfortune in a distant province, but is forbidden to mourn openly. Yet behind every careful brushstroke, behind each soft verse recited, lies an aching knowledge. Most will never have the chance to share these talents beyond these walls. The halls echo with the distant strains of guzheng strings, the trembling quiver of bamboo flutes, and the gentle shuffle of silk slippers on polished stone. The harem transforms itself instantly. Musicians appear as if conjured. Dancers glide forth like shimmering spirits, and servants scurry to prepare fragrant teas and exotic fruits. Every flick of the wrist, every tilt of the head is a silent gamble, a chance to be seen, to be remembered, or to be forgotten forever. Others write poems on scraps of rice paper, tucking them into hidden crevices or burning them to ash, their words rising to the night sky like fragile prayers. Some concubines pour their entire hearts into their craft, believing that if they cannot be remembered for beauty, or offspring lanterns flicker to life one by one, like fireflies rising from deep grass. Only here, alone with the quiet, can they breathe without performance. But within this sealed world, the rhythms of survival continue without pause, untouched by the distant thunder of revolt. Elsewhere, in hidden gardens beneath crooked pine trees, a few of the more favored concubines strolled beneath parasols, whispering secrets that could change the tides of palace politics. They trade stories like jade hairpins, offering carefully curated truths in exchange for rumors, warnings, or small acts of kindness. Each one a universe of longing, each one a silent story the world beyond will never fully hear. The cycle begins anew. Beauty prepared, alliances rehearsed, hearts steeled for another day in the emperor's endless theater. A trembling maid approaches with a folded note, eyes cast down. One concubine reads it in silence, her face a mask of serenity, but her fingers curl inward, nails pressing crescent moons into her palm. Meanwhile, a rival watches from a balcony above, her gaze sharp as the blade of a hidden dagger. As the sun arcs higher, the air grows heavy with heat and the scent of magnolia blossoms. A concubine collapses from illness, her attendants rushing to carry her away, their faces tight with fear. A younger girl, newly arrived, cries quietly behind a screen, clutching a small embroidered pouch that still smells faintly of home. And so the hours pass, each one thick with unspoken grief and thinly veiled ambitions. In the afternoon, the emperor might wander the gardens or summon a private performance. The chosen performers move with perfect grace, but inside, their hearts pound like war drums. Outside, beyond the palace walls, the empire bends beneath the weight of famine, corruption, and distant rebellions. As twilight spills across the sky, turning the world to molten gold, the concubines return to their chambers. In their private quarters, they remove their elaborate headdresses, set aside the rigid postures, and slip into simpler robes. Some comb out their long hair in the moonlight, each stroke a meditation on time's quiet cruelty. A few hold tiny clay figurines, offerings to unknown gods, or perhaps to the selves they left behind when they crossed the palace threshold. Outside their latticed windows, the cicadas sing an endless summer lament, a sound that feels as ancient as the walls themselves. When sleep finally arrives, it is shallow and uneasy, haunted by half-formed dreams of freedom, of open fields, of simpler lives lost to the unstoppable tide of ambition and duty. Through all of this, there is one constant thread, the quiet, unwavering strength that pulses beneath every silken layer, every hushed breath, every guarded glance. For even in the gilded cage, even amidst betrayals and schemes, the human spirit finds ways to survive, to carve out small pockets of tenderness, of laughter, of secret memory. By the time the first rooster cries beneath the dawn's pale veil, the palace stirs once more. And so they rise, these women of the harem, shadows of moonlight and silk, dreamers in a garden of golden bars. Imagine for a moment standing alone in a vast hall. The moonlight spills through carved lattice screens, casting ghostly patterns on the cold marble floor. The hall is silent, except for the echo of your own breath. You are the emperor, son of heaven, ruler of millions, master of life and death. As petitions are read aloud, his mind often drifts far from state affairs. He thinks of the perfumed chambers beyond the walls, of a particular concubine's soft laugh, of the moonlit pavilions where shadows dance on water. And yet, in this midnight hour, your power feels as hollow as the sound of your footsteps. Each scroll handed to him is a thread in a web he can neither escape nor fully comprehend. He senses the undercurrent of fear in every bow, the unspoken calculations behind each smile. But who would dare offer such a gift to the Son of Heaven? When the world sees the Emperor, they see divine radiance. The sound of the chin, deep, slow, mournful, wraps around him like a cloak of nostalgia. Before the crown, before the councils, before the endless sea of weary eyes, his favorite dishes arrive in ornate bowls, each bite carefully arranged like a tiny battlefield of flavor. But each meal tastes the same, a reminder of isolation. He studied ancient texts on statecraft, consulted aged ministers with trembling voices and sharp eyes, and penned edicts with his own hand. Yet each effort seemed to sink into the vast sea of court politics, devoured by currents stronger than any decree. If he could not steer the ship of state, at least he could control the small pleasures within his grasp. A night with a favored concubine. The concubines approach him not as women, but as competitors, each touch heavy with unspoken bargains. The gardens bloom only because armies of gardeners labor in secret under threat of severe punishment. The paintings are mere illusions of distant freedom, no more real than the moon's reflection on a pond. A rare flower blooming in his private garden, a painted screen depicting mountains he would never climb. Taxes grow heavier, peasants flee their villages, bandits prowl the roads like hungry wolves. Officials enrich themselves with impunity, their silken robes concealing festering rot. When the emperor saw the portrait, he stared at it for a long time and ordered it burned. In its place, he commissioned a new painting, a grand scene depicting him standing atop a mountain peak, a dragon coiling at his feet, lightning crackling in the sky. They speak of omens, of comets and eclipses, of movements in the northern sky that signal rebellion or renewal. The collective roar of the assembled court shouting, "Long live the Emperor!" The slow softening of a man who has tasted too many sweet wines and too many whispered promises. She says nothing, only looks at him with eyes that do not judge, do not scheme. Sometimes he wakes with tears on his cheeks, the dream evaporating like dew under morning sun. Their voices reverberated through the hall, crashing against the walls and returning to him as a single deafening note of finality. They see the dragon robe shimmering with golden embroidery, the bejeweled crown heavy with jade and pearls. Each report is a crack in the imperial mirror, but he finds it easier to look away. He wonders what his ancestors would think if they could see him now, not as the radiant son of heaven, but as a man lost within the palace labyrinth, haunted by his own ghost. To abandon, it would not just be his own death. It would unravel the myth that binds the empire together. The truth he rarely admits, even to himself. He is both the spider at the center and the fly caught in the snare. Each jest from a courtier lands with the hollow thud of a wooden drum. He laughs when required, smiles when expected, yet inside, he drifts further from the world he rules. He had become an icon, an instrument, a phantom monarch painted in shifting shades of expectation and fear. They see a man who can command armies, who holds the fates of countless souls in a single flick of his sleeve. But beneath these silken layers lies a beating heart, plagued by uncertainty, loneliness, and a fear too deep to name. From the first day he ascended the throne, the emperor became a living paradox, exalted yet imprisoned, worshipped yet watched, omnipotent yet shackled by endless expectations. Wide courtyards where autumn leaves tumble like lost promises, echoing corridors where even whispered steps sound like thunder. In the early mornings, he sits on the dragon throne in the audience hall, flanked by stiff rows of courtiers, each one a living mask of submission and intrigue. But duty drags him back. Another plea for grain relief from the south. another report of bandits in the borderlands, another memorial condemning corruption among local magistrates. After the audience's end, he withdraws into his private quarters, spaces grand yet eerily empty. In these moments, the emperor confronts the weight of his role. He knows that within his walls, eunuchs plot for influence, officials trade bribes like playing pieces on a board, and concubines weave silken nets of affection and betrayal. And yet, despite the latticework of deceit, he yearns for genuine connection. A word spoken without agenda, a touch unclouded by ambition. His meals are served by trembling hands. Even his wine is tested for poison before he drinks. At night, he might summon poets to recite verses beneath lantern light, or musicians to play ancient melodies that stir half-forgotten memories. He recalls his youth, running barefoot in the palace gardens, chasing dragonflies, laughing without consequence. He remembers the day he first sat upon the dragon throne, the air so thick with incense he could hardly breathe, the ceremonial words echoing like distant thunder. In that moment, he understood that he had crossed a threshold, no longer a boy, no longer free. Over the years, he tried to embrace this role. Eventually, exhaustion replaced enthusiasm. His reforms met silent resistance. His punishments turned into theater, and his decrees were diluted before they even reached the provinces. And so, like many before him, he retreated inward. But even these pleasures are shadows, echoes of what they might have been. And beyond the walls of his sanctuary, the empire groans. Reports pile on his desk, rebellions brewing in the west, famines in the south, barbarian incursions at the borders. At banquets, he feigns interest in poetry contests and dance performances. He dreams often of a faceless woman who stands on a bridge at dawn, her hair loose in the wind. In quieter hours, he walks alone through moonlit corridors, his hand tracing the cold, lacquered railings. Once, a young court painter dared to capture his true likeness. It was a lie, but a beautiful one. And like so many lies, it felt safer than the truth. Occasionally, he seeks counsel from the stars. Astronomers set up bronze armillary spheres and trace the slow crawl of constellations across the ink-black heavens. But he knows that stars are indifferent. The universe does not bend for emperors, no matter how many altars they raise or sacrifices they burn. Beneath his robes, his body bears the marks of excess and neglect, faint scars from childhood illnesses, bruises from drunken falls. Despite the silks and jade, he feels like a hollow reed, buffeted by the wind of endless flattery and deceit. In rare moments of clarity, he contemplates leaving it all behind, discarding the dragon robe, slipping through a hidden gate, vanishing into the night as a nameless wanderer. But he knows he cannot. His identity is a fortress built of duty, tradition, and centuries of expectation. And so he remains, a lonely figure moving through corridors of power, wearing a mask so finely crafted that even he cannot remove it. He sits on his throne during grand festivals, watching endless processions of dancers swirling in brilliant silks like living waves. Gongs thunder, flutes weep, and the air smells of jasmine and roasted duck. He sees mothers weeping over shallow graves, merchants waylaid by bandits on forest roads, children selling wild herbs in markets, their eyes hollow. He wonders if they curse his name in whispered prayers, or if they simply survive, too busy fighting hunger to care who sits upon the dragon throne. Ministers raise their cups, praising his immortal wisdom and unmatched virtue. But in his mind, he imagines the empty fields beyond the walls, peasants bent under the summer sun, faces gaunt, fingers blistered. The courtiers laugh politely at tales of fox spirits and mountain hermits. Yet he listens intently, his soul straining toward these stories of ordinary wanderers and outlaws. He wonders if they think of him, the emperor they've never seen, a distant figure blamed and worshipped in equal measure. They whisper that the emperor has gone mad, that he consults spirits in the moonlight, that he has abandoned all interest in ruling. The emperor closes his eyes and imagines himself as that fisherman, hands calloused, face tanned by the sun. They become gatekeepers of his reality, deciding which truths reach his ears and which are buried in cold, silent vaults. A life measured not by tributes and scrolls, but by the scent of pine, the rush of a mountain stream, the chorus of cicadas at dusk. The actors, concubines, courtiers, generals, perform their parts with elegant precision. Scripts are written in advance, lines rehearsed in moonlit gardens, plots whispered over tea. In the evenings, he invites storytellers into the palace halls. He nods faintly, then gestures for more wine. The spell shatters. In one recurring nightmare, he stands alone on a wide plain, surrounded by burning fields. Ash swirls around him like dark snow. He calls out, but no voice answers. The first sound is always the soft, precise steps of eunuchs, waiting for his command. The first sight, golden drapery, embroidered dragons twisting forever in silent flight. Once, he orders a festival open to commoners, hoping to glimpse genuine smiles. He waves, but no one dares to wave back. The coin's worn edge feels more real than all the silks and scrolls combined. He wonders how many mouths it might feed, how many tears it might dry. He throws gold coins, but they scatter in the dirt like meaningless seeds. But the streets are lined with soldiers, and the people kneel in terror rather than joy. Their eyes never meet his. Their foreheads press into the dust. He runs until his legs buckle, but the horizon remains forever distant. He sees in the boy's hesitant movements the same longing for freedom, the same flickers of silent rebellion. The courtiers erupt into renewed chatter, and the emperor slides back into his porcelain shell. Duty is a chain forged long before his birth, each link hammered by ancestors who themselves were prisoners of the same golden prison. He recalls fragments of ancient scrolls that spoke of emperors who disguised themselves to wander among commoners. He gazes into the dark treetops, where night birds murmur secrets only they can understand. The old emperor had gripped his wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "Trust no one, not even yourself." He orders everyone out, locks the doors, and extinguishes all lanterns. In the darkness, he lies on the floor, feeling the cold seep into his bones. He imagines slipping into a simple robe, stepping beyond the gates, and feeling rain on his face, without attendants scurrying to shield him. In this imagined ruin, he is no longer emperor, no longer divine, no longer anything. Just a man. One night, a storyteller recounts the legend of a fisherman who finds freedom by abandoning all his nets and walking into the forest with nothing but a bamboo hat. Another mask in a long line of masks. When the story ends, he opens his eyes to find everyone staring at him, waiting for his reaction. Eunuchs slip silently into the room, relighting lanterns, opening silk screens, readying his ceremonial attire. They try to reach him with memorials, subtle poetry, coded phrases. As he sinks, the water glitters with coins, scrolls, dragon emblems, symbols of all he was meant to guard. In these dreams, he feels a peace just before the final gulp, as if the weight of empire dissolves into the cool embrace of the depths. Lanterns sway gently, casting trembling shadows across their faces. For a moment, surrounded by falling petals and the quiet trill of night insects, it almost feels human. But each attempt feels like tossing pebbles into a bottomless well. Outside the palace, rumors swirl like autumn leaves. Some officials still hope to save him. Loyal ministers who remember his early promises of reform. Those who persist too boldly disappear, exiled to distant frontiers, confined to monasteries, or simply vanish into the fog of imperial justice. The eunuchs thrive in this darkness. Like silent spiders, they weave unseen webs around the emperor. They flatter, bribe, manipulate. And the emperor, craving comfort over confrontation, lets them. His world becomes a stage, every day a carefully choreographed masquerade. He sits at the center, both audience and lead actor, unable to escape his own performance. In fleeting moments of lucidity, he wonders if this was always his destiny, to be worshipped yet unseen, adored yet unloved. But such fantasies die as quickly as they arrive. At night, his sleep is haunted by dreams of fire and water. Sometimes he dreams of drowning in a jade pool. Beautiful maidens laugh on the shore, their faces blurred, unreachable. When he wakes, the first thing he feels is the heavy scent of incense, burning to hide the musty air. He rises, dons the ceremonial robes, and walks into yet another day where nothing truly changes. He tries, occasionally, to reconnect with his people. From atop his palanquin, he watches them as if peering through a fogged mirror. That night, he sits alone, turning a single coin in his fingers for hours. Yet he knows it is too late for gestures, too late for redemption. He remembers his own father's final words, spoken on a rain-soaked night. At the time, the words seemed cruel. Now, they feel prophetic. The emperor watches as his own son, a timid boy with a scholar's hands and fearful eyes, is trained to inherit this poisoned chalice. But he also sees how quickly the boy is learning to bow, to smile on command, to hide his thoughts behind a wall of porcelain courtesy. One evening, they dine together in a private garden. The emperor reaches out, touching his son's hand. The boy flinches, but does not pull away. They sit in silence for a long time. Then the emperor says softly, almost to himself, "Do you know what freedom tastes like?" The boy looks at him, puzzled, unsure whether to answer or remain silent. The emperor does not press. Instead, he releases the boy's hand and stands. As he walks away, he feels the boy's eyes on his back, heavy with questions that will never find answers. Later that night, the emperor returns to his chambers. He imagines the palace collapsing around him, tiles shattering, pillars splintering, marble dragons crumbling to dust. And for a brief heartbeat, he feels truly alive. Then, as always, dawn arrives. The illusion evaporates with the morning mist. He rises, shoulders the weight of 1,000 expectations, and resumes his place on the endless stage. There are secret corridors in the palace that few have walked, passages behind tapestry-lined walls, spiral stairs carved into the stone, hidden balconies overlooking moonlit courtyards. At night, when sleep refuses him, the emperor wanders these silent arteries like a ghost. He listens to the distant echo of his own footfalls, soft as the beat of a dying heart. Sometimes he pauses behind a lattice window to watch the night patrols below. Their laughter is muted, brittle, more like the sound of porcelain chimes in a cold wind. Perhaps they tell each other stories of life before the palace, glimpses of mothers brushing their hair, fathers returning from distant fields, brothers chasing fireflies under twilight skies. They hold lanterns shaped like lotus blossoms, casting dancing pools of light over the gravel paths. Guards march in rigid formation, their armor gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Their discipline should comfort him, yet he feels no connection. They move like clockwork dolls, faces hidden behind bronze visors, each step dictated by duty rather than choice. From his vantage point, he glimpses clusters of concubines strolling the gardens under chaperone watch. He imagines what they say when they think no one hears. She kept her gaze level, her words minimal, her steps measured. But within hours, rumors spread. Eunuchs whispered of her insolence, accusing her of treachery, witchcraft, sedition. Her absence was an unspoken sentence, a void he carried within. Sometimes he catches a flicker of white silk vanishing around a corner, or hears faint laughter echoing through the halls. After that, he stopped seeking honesty in the eyes of his courtesans. Their ministers await, bearing scrolls thicker than a man's arm. Grain shortages, border skirmishes, collapsing bridges, petitions from scholars, pleas from widows, all meticulously documented, bound in silk ribbons, waiting for his decree. By morning, she was gone, her fate sealed behind a crimson screen no one dared open. His mind drifts elsewhere, to the scent of pine needles after rain, to the taste of a single ripe plum stolen from an orchard as a child, to the warmth of an unseen sun beyond the palace walls. At first, this intrigued him. He saw in her a reflection of the defiance he had once tried to nurture within himself. Maybe they remember simpler joys, a bowl of warm rice, the smell of rain-soaked earth, a childhood friend's hand gripping theirs on festival nights. He wonders if any of them still dream of escape. He kneels low, forehead pressed against the cold marble. Yet he knows better. Most have learned to survive by surrendering their true selves long ago. The palace demands masks, and those who resist too long vanish into silence or madness. Once, many years ago, there was a concubine who refused to smile on command. One evening, he summoned her privately, hoping for a spark of real conversation, something raw and human. She looked at him without fear or reverence, her eyes two still lakes. "Why do you not bow?" he asked. She answered, "Because you don't truly want me to." For a moment, he felt a tremor in his chest, like a half-forgotten song stirring in the dark. The emperor ordered no inquiry, signed no execution scroll. Now, as he walks the secret corridors, he imagines seeing her ghost. At dawn, he returns to his official chambers. He listens in a fog, nodding occasionally, fingers drumming softly on the lacquered table. One day, a young advisor, his voice trembling, dares to speak plainly. "Your Majesty, the people suffer. The coffers run dry. The provinces are restless. If nothing changes, rebellion will come." There is no anger in his gaze, only a weary curiosity. The emperor tilts his head, regarding the young man as one might examine an unusual insect. "How old are you?" he asks. 23, Your Majesty." "So young," he murmurs. "Tell me, do you enjoy plum blossoms?" The advisor, bewildered, raises his head slightly. "Yes, Your Majesty." The emperor smiles faintly. They bloom fiercely, even in frost, but they are fragile. One hard wind, and they vanish. The advisor opens his mouth to speak, but words fail. The emperor waves a languid hand, signaling dismissal. Guards escort the young man away. Rebellion. The word feels both distant and intimate, like a childhood friend who grew into a stranger. Later, the emperor sits alone, turning over the advisor's words like pebbles in his palm. He knows what awaits: burning cities, torn banners, execution pits. He envisions the palace gates shattered by battering rams, his statues toppled into lotus ponds, scrolls burning in temple courtyards. The emperor watches from his gilded throne, a faint smile fixed on his lips, as if he alone knows the play's ending. Other times, he laughs softly, startling the night birds outside. They refill his ink, replace his candles, remove the tear-stained scrolls with careful hands. Perhaps he thinks the end is a kindness. Perhaps it is the only honest act remaining. A figure stands at the center, back turned, hair unbound, a single white robe billowing in the wind. Festivals grow ever more lavish, silks imported from distant kingdoms shimmer in torchlight. Endless parades of dancers swirl through marble courtyards. And yet, beneath the dread, a small ember of relief glows. No matter how many steps he takes, the figure remains just beyond reach. And die unnoticed, nightly banquets where laughter echoes like bird calls in an abandoned hall. He lifts a hand to touch his reflection, but stops, as if afraid the surface might ripple and reveal something monstrous beneath. As months pass, the empire rots from within. Corrupt officials barter grain for jewels. Armies desert to become bandits. Famine gnaws at the countryside. Yet inside the palace, the masquerade continues. Once mighty commands now slip from his tongue like falling petals. There, he reads by candlelight, tracing the inked characters slowly, savoring each one as though it were a drop of rare wine. Artists toil for months, painting bustling markets, victorious armies, fields heavy with harvest. He sees no starving peasants, no crumbling villages, no ghosts drifting through deserted temples. Only beauty, abundance, triumph. Musicians play songs no one listens to. Actors perform tragedies for audiences who clap without feeling. They bow deeply, assuring him of the empire's undying prosperity. In the evenings, he retreats to his private study, a chamber filled with ancient scrolls and moon-viewing platforms. Courtiers fawn more desperately. Concubines paint their smiles thicker. Eunuchs bow lower, each movement an offering to a god they no longer believe in but cannot abandon. He lingers over poems written by long-dead monks, lines about mountains and drifting clouds, about rivers that flow endlessly toward the sea. Inside waits a room filled with childhood treasures, bamboo flutes, old poetry scrolls, a faded paper kite shaped like a carp. Sometimes he weeps silently, tears slipping onto the delicate paper, blurring the calligraphy. He feels the cold stone beneath his bare feet, the slight tremor in his chest, the hush of shadows pressing close. The eunuchs, trained to obey without question, say nothing. For a moment, the ghost of that fisherman's self whispers from the darkness, calling him to step beyond, to reclaim something lost. They understand that their master is both the center of the universe and utterly alone, a god in a cage of his own making. On the rare nights when sleep finds him, he dreams of a field of white chrysanthemums swaying under a pale moon. In the dream, he walks toward the figure, but the distance never closes. When he wakes, he always feels as if something precious has slipped from his grasp, a final chance to speak, to be seen, to be forgiven. His days become a rhythm of empty rituals. Audience with ministers who recite hollow praises, inspection of imperial gardens where exotic flowers bloom. Each morning, he stands before a polished bronze mirror. The face that gazes back is unfamiliar, more mask than man. One dawn, he orders the mirror removed. When the attendants hesitate, he repeats the command in a voice so quiet it trembles. The next day, the mirror is gone. In its place, he leaves an empty alcove, a silent testimony to all he no longer wishes to confront. As he ages, his movements slow. His steps falter, his hands tremble in holding a brush. Yet even in decay, the court performs its dance. And the emperor watches it all, the final act of a tragedy he can neither stop nor escape. In one last act of irony, he commissions a series of paintings, grand scrolls depicting the empire's eternal glory. When they present the finished scrolls, he studies them carefully. He smiles, then orders the scrolls hung in the grand hall, where they shimmer under lantern light like portals to a world that never was. Visitors marvel at the paintings, praising the emperor's vision. But behind their lowered eyes, they see the cracks in the marble floors, the dust collecting on silken banners, the echoes in empty corridors. And the emperor, he sees it too, but he remains silent. In the stillness of midnight, when the palace finally sleeps, he returns to those hidden corridors. He stops before a locked door he has not opened in decades. He hesitates, hand on the latch, but his fingers fall away. He turns, disappearing once more into the labyrinth of his own creation. In the hushed pre-dawn hours, before the first bell of morning prayer echoes through the palace, a restless hush hangs over the city. Beyond the vermilion walls, in alleyways lit only by flickering lanterns and the occasional ember from a dying charcoal brazier, the city stirs. Farmers, their backs curved like bows strung too tightly, shuffle toward the markets. Merchants unfold stalls, stacking radishes, ginger, fish, still gasping softly in wicker baskets. In one corner, an old woman boils rice gruel, her hands knotted like roots, eyes reflecting a lifetime of quiet storms. Amid these small awakenings, rumors move faster than the smoke spiraling from chimneys. They say the taxes have doubled again. My cousin's village, soldiers took all the grain. They watch the horizon with empty eyes, knowing rebellions swell like spring floods, quietly at first, then unstoppable. A distant figure blamed and worshipped in equal measure. They whisper that the emperor has gone mad, that he consults spirits in the moonlight, that he has abandoned all interest in ruling. The emperor closes his eyes and imagines himself as that fisherman, hands calloused, face tanned by the sun. They become gatekeepers of his reality, deciding which truths reach his ears and which are buried in cold, silent vaults. A life measured not by tributes and scrolls, but by the scent of pine, the rush of a mountain stream, the chorus of cicadas at dusk. The actors, concubines, courtiers, generals, perform their parts with elegant precision. Scripts are written in advance, lines rehearsed in moonlit gardens, plots whispered over tea. In the evenings, he invites storytellers into the palace halls. He nods faintly, then gestures for more wine. The spell shatters. In one recurring nightmare, he stands alone on a wide plain, surrounded by burning fields. Ash swirls around him like dark snow. He calls out, but no voice answers. The first sound is always the soft, precise steps of eunuchs, waiting for his command. The first sight, golden drapery, embroidered dragons twisting forever in silent flight. Once, he orders a festival open to commoners, hoping to glimpse genuine smiles. He waves, but no one dares to wave back. The coin's worn edge feels more real than all the silks and scrolls combined. He wonders how many mouths it might feed, how many tears it might dry. He throws gold coins, but they scatter in the dirt like meaningless seeds. But the streets are lined with soldiers, and the people kneel in terror rather than joy. Their eyes never meet his. Their foreheads press into the dust. He runs until his legs buckle, but the horizon remains forever distant. He sees in the boy's hesitant movements the same longing for freedom, the same flickers of silent rebellion. The courtiers erupt into renewed chatter, and the emperor slides back into his porcelain shell. Duty is a chain forged long before his birth, each link hammered by ancestors who themselves were prisoners of the same golden prison. He recalls fragments of ancient scrolls that spoke of emperors who disguised themselves to wander among commoners. He gazes into the dark treetops, where night birds murmur secrets only they can understand. The old emperor had gripped his wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "Trust no one, not even yourself." He orders everyone out, locks the doors, and extinguishes all lanterns. In the darkness, he lies on the floor, feeling the cold seep into his bones. He imagines slipping into a simple robe, stepping beyond the gates, and feeling rain on his face, without attendants scurrying to shield him. In this imagined ruin, he is no longer emperor, no longer divine, no longer anything. Just a man. One night, a storyteller recounts the legend of a fisherman who finds freedom by abandoning all his nets and walking into the forest with nothing but a bamboo hat. Another mask in a long line of masks. When the story ends, he opens his eyes to find everyone staring at him, waiting for his reaction. Eunuchs slip silently into the room, relighting lanterns, opening silk screens, readying his ceremonial attire. They try to reach him with memorials, subtle poetry, coded phrases. As he sinks, the water glitters with coins, scrolls, dragon emblems, symbols of all he was meant to guard. In these dreams, he feels a peace just before the final gulp, as if the weight of empire dissolves into the cool embrace of the depths. Lanterns sway gently, casting trembling shadows across their faces. For a moment, surrounded by falling petals and the quiet trill of night insects, it almost feels human. But each attempt feels like tossing pebbles into a bottomless well. Outside the palace, Rumors swirl like autumn leaves. Some officials still hope to save him. Loyal ministers who remember his early promises of reform. Those who persist too boldly disappear, exiled to distant frontiers, confined to monasteries, or simply vanish into the fog of imperial justice. The eunuchs thrive in this darkness. Like silent spiders, they weave unseen webs around the emperor. They flatter, bribe, manipulate. And the emperor, craving comfort over confrontation, lets them. His world becomes a stage, every day a carefully choreographed masquerade. He sits at the center, both audience and lead actor, unable to escape his own performance. In fleeting moments of lucidity, he wonders if this was always his destiny, to be worshipped yet unseen, adored yet unloved. But such fantasies die as quickly as they arrive. At night, his sleep is haunted by dreams of fire and water. Sometimes he dreams of drowning in a jade pool. Beautiful maidens laugh on the shore, their faces blurred, unreachable. When he wakes, the first thing he feels is the heavy scent of incense, burning to hide the musty air. He rises, dons the ceremonial robes, and walks into yet another day where nothing truly changes. He tries, occasionally, to reconnect with his people. From atop his palanquin, he watches them as if peering through a fogged mirror. That night, he sits alone, turning a single coin in his fingers for hours. Yet he knows it is too late for gestures, too late for redemption. He remembers his own father's final words, spoken on a rain-soaked night. At the time, the words seemed cruel. Now, they feel prophetic. The emperor watches as his own son, a timid boy with a scholar's hands and fearful eyes, is trained to inherit this poisoned chalice. But he also sees how quickly the boy is learning to bow, to smile on command, to hide his thoughts behind a wall of porcelain courtesy. One evening, they dine together in a private garden. The emperor reaches out, touching his son's hand. The boy flinches, but does not pull away. His mother, her face pale and drawn, pleads with him in hoarse whispers. "I heard the northern provinces are starving. Children trading roots for scraps of cloth." He scrapes and scrapes, shavings gathering like fallen snow at his feet. These whispers slither between shadows, coiling beneath doorways, nesting in hushed tea-house corners. Every word a match, each breath a spark. Some tremble as they roll them open, sweat slipping beneath ceremonial collars. Petals, once purple as spilled ink, now hang shriveled, twisting in the wind. His thoughts wander to when he was 16, reading poetry by moonlight, dreaming of reforms, of opening grain stores to the hungry, of building libraries instead of walls. Their footsteps echo across marble floors as if mocking their urgency. Here, news of rebellion is folded delicately into reports, laced with euphemisms, localized unrest. Her hair is bound tight, her cheeks streaked with ash. She lifts a small banner, inked hastily with 4 words: "Justice for the people." Temporary supply disruptions, minor provincial disturbances. In their eyes, a fire both fragile and furious. At the city gates, guards stand slack-jawed with fatigue, their armor dulled and loose at the seams. In a narrow lane near the East Market, a boy crouches, sharpening a bamboo pole into a crude spear. Another young mother cradles a baby with one arm, gripping a rusted sickle in the other. "Please, you're only 17. You don't understand." Silk-robed courtiers fan themselves, wine pooled in jade cups. They speak in riddles and poetry contests, praising each other's metaphors for moonlight and plum blossoms. But the boy does not look up. Lanterns bob like small moons among the fields. A chant rises, tremulous but gaining strength with each step. In the palace, eunuchs scurry through corridors, balancing trays of sweet rice cakes and medicinal broths. How his gaze drifts through conversations, as though peering into a different life, one only he remembers. He pauses at every doorway, as if searching for something. A memory, perhaps, or the echo of a voice long gone. Ministers read these scrolls in lacquered halls, eyes darting, fingers drumming calloused patterns on jade armrests. Each scroll is heavier than the last. Her voice trembles, tears smudging her carefully painted lips. He stops, watches its flame gutter in the breeze. The tiny flame fights to remain, defiant against the hush that threatens to devour it. Perhaps it is the final truth I have long denied. She knows that beyond these walls, the world burns. But the Emperor does not come to council today. He is in his private garden, seated beneath a withering wisteria. He holds an old bamboo scroll, its corners frayed. A revolution is not born in grand speeches or marble halls. It is born here, in blisters on a farmer's hands, in the tear-streaked cheeks of mothers, in the resolve that grows when every other option has rotted away. Years ago, he had written essays urging fair taxes, mercy in governance. His words were ignored, his students scattered. Now, he watches lantern lights snake up the hillsides like a constellation reborn. Each lantern holds a face. Farmers, scholars, mothers, children, all glowing softly, all drifting away. He runs a thumb over a ceramic cup, tracing the hairline cracks. Dreams that now taste like vinegar on the tongue. A small girl looks up at him, eyes bright with something like forgiveness. Far beyond the capital, in a mountain village where pines claw at the sky, a woman stands in a clearing. Around her, ragged figures gather, farmers, smiths, widows, orphans. One elder, bent double with age, lifts a hoe like a spear. They are not an army, not yet, but they are something more dangerous. They are the embodiment of desperation, congealed into courage. At dusk, when cicadas fall silent, and even the wind holds its breath, they begin their march. For every grain stolen, we rise. For every life starved, we march. In a distant town, a scholar listens to these chants echo across the valley. He feels the tremor in the air, the sense that something irreversible has begun. Meanwhile, inside the capital walls, laughter drifts from banquet halls. No one mentions the price of rice. No one mentions the towns that no longer send tribute. No one dares speak of the emperor's vanishing presence, how his once commanding voice now sounds like reeds rattling in the wind in a secluded corner. A young concubine kneels, head bowed, reciting lines from an ancient love poem. But here, she is an ornament, a petal to be admired until it wilts. Through all this, the emperor's shadow stretches long and thin. Some nights he walks alone through the moonlit corridors, slippers brushing against polished stones. He finds only silence. On one such night, he wanders past the eastern courtyard, where a single lantern still burns. A thought slides into his mind, uninvited and sharp. Perhaps rebellion is not the enemy. For a moment, he almost smiles. But the smile fades, replaced by a weariness deeper than any wound. Above, the stars wheel in their patient orbits. Below, 1,000 hearts beat in secret cadence, each one a drum calling the night to witness. As the emperor retreats into the shadow of the colonnade, he does not see the messenger sprinting across the outer yard, scroll clutched tight, hair wild from the wind. The scroll holds words that will shatter the fragile hush. The northern provinces have risen. The people march south. The governors flee. Tomorrow, the palace gates will tremble. But tonight, the emperor sleeps. In his dreams, he stands on a narrow footbridge over a river of lanterns. He reaches for them, but his hands pass through like mist. The river carries them beyond his sight. In the hush of that dream, one lantern pauses. Then she too drifts on, her light swallowed by the night. In the blue hush just before dawn, as the first timid birds stir in palace gardens, a different kind of awakening unravels across the empire. Beyond the city's east gate, in a village so small it does not appear on any official maps, a council of elders huddles inside a crumbling ancestral hall. Smoke from an oil lamp curls around their weathered faces, each wrinkle a map of lost harvests and buried children. Her hair is cut short, a silent defiance against the old codes that bound her mother and grandmother before her. She grips a bamboo staff, her knuckles white, voice low but unwavering. A young woman stands among them. "They have taken everything," she says, words trembling but sharp as a blade. "They taxed our rice, our pigs, our children's future." His breath rattles like dry leaves. "We are not soldiers," he croaks. "We are farmers. What can we do against palace guards and iron gates? They left us nothing but ghosts in our own fields." An old man coughs, struggling to rise from his mat. She lifts her chin, eyes glinting in the lantern light. The song carries the softness of a lullaby and the ache of an old wound. "If the emperor will not feed you, the earth shall. And if your rulers continue to drink wine while your children starve, then your silence becomes complicity. They forget we are the roots. When roots rise, no wall can hold." Outside, a thin drizzle begins, beating on wooden eaves, pattering into empty water jars. Perhaps it is only the echo of 1,000 unspoken oaths, finally breaking free. "My brother died last winter." We sent plea after plea for relief. Nothing came but tax collectors. But in the hall, the warmth grows, not from the lamp, but from the slow, quiet kindling of shared resolve. He closes his eyes, remembering a time when edicts carried words of compassion, not demands for tribute. In a crowded tea house, a traveling actor recounts last week's performance in the capital. Only a small pouch of millet and a battered flute. He spends entire moons in the Lotus Pavilion, listening to love songs, feeding peacocks, while the grain barns rot. Meanwhile, in the southern provinces, a monk crosses rice paddies under a cloak woven from old prayer flags. His steps are steady, sandals sinking into the mud. They sit around him, forgetting for a moment the gnawing emptiness in their bellies. In his dream, he walks barefoot through an endless meadow. He almost laughs. The grass is high, tickling his palms, and each step echoes like a drumbeat. The air thickens. His throat closes. Another bites down so hard on a knuckle that blood beads at the edge of their mouth. A concubine reaches out, fingers trembling as she touches his sleeve. But he shoves her hand away, stands abruptly, and staggers toward the window. Somewhere, a father buries his son beneath a borrowed blanket. Along the road, villagers gather in clusters, their faces hollow with hunger. When they see the monk approach, they bow, but he waves them up. He carries no staff, no scrolls of doctrine. He sits beneath a banyan tree and begins to play, a single wandering melody that floats over the fields. The echo of his breath seems to bounce off the walls. Villagers, soldiers who deserted, monks, scholars, they huddle in circles, tracing battle plans into dirt with calloused fingers. Soon, the children come first, then the mothers, then the old men. When he finishes, he opens his eyes, gaze sweeping over them like a quiet rain. "The emperor has forgotten you," he says simply. "But the earth remembers your footprints. The rivers remember your sweat." He pauses, holding up the pouch of millet. He bows, but his mind drifts elsewhere, to half-remembered melodies, to faces of children he has never seen, to fields he has never set foot on. An old woman weeps softly. A child touches the hem of the monk's robe, as if to confirm he is real. She closes her eyes and feels her late husband's ghost at her side. He had dreamed of a future where their children could learn to write, to dance, to eat without fear. Somewhere far away, a thunderclap rolls across the sky, though no storm follows. In the northern frontier towns, merchants who once sold silk and incense now trade rumors instead. "They say the emperor no longer attends council," he whispers, voice dropping low despite the rising hum of patrons around him. A man with soot-streaked hands, a blacksmith, by the look of his cracked palms, slams his cup down. A chorus of nods circles the table. Someone spits into the dirt floor. Across from them, an old scribe rolls prayer beads between fingers. In the palace, news arrives like distant thunder, heavy, ominous, easy to ignore until it is overhead. A scroll trembles in the hands of a minister. The eastern villages refuse to deliver spring taxes. The southern towns have barricaded roads. Northern coal shipments halted. Temple granaries looted. The minister bows so low, his forehead touches the jade tiles. But no reply comes. Elsewhere in the palace, the emperor dozes amid a circle of concubines, his head resting against a lacquered screen, painted with cranes and pine trees. In the dream, he feels light, as if all burdens have slipped from his shoulders. But then he sees shapes rising from the grass, countless figures, their faces blurred, advancing toward him in silent procession. When he reaches to greet them, they part around him like mist, leaving him alone in a cold wind. He wakes with a start, heart hammering, eyes wild. Outside, the moon hangs heavy and indifferent, illuminating the still ponds and carefully pruned pines. He presses a hand to the glass. Somewhere beyond these walls, a mother digs for wild roots in frost-hardened soil. And here there is only the sound of silk rustling and musicians plucking strings to ease his nightmares. Beneath the city walls, small fires flicker in secret. A pot of millet boils over a shared flame, each mouthful passed hand to hand, carrying stories rather than seasoning. A former tax official stares at the embers, whispering a single phrase like a mantra. Enough. A boy, his cheek marred by an old burn, lifts a wooden spear and vows, tomorrow we knock on the palace gates. Near the outer moat, an old woman leans against a stone lantern, her eyes shining under a hood. Now she raises her fist into the night, shaking as if pulling stars from the sky. Above them all, the imperial walls gleam like a dragon's scales in moonlight. Beautiful, yes, but brittle beneath the weight of unspoken grief. And in the echoing chambers of that gilded palace, the emperor paces. Each footstep echoes in empty halls. He stops beside a shrine to his ancestors, incense curling into fragile loops. In that moment, something shifts inside him. Not repentance, not quite. Perhaps only a recognition of a truth long denied, that a throne is not built on gold alone, but on the quiet breaths of countless souls who till the earth, bear the hunger, and still dare to hope. The fires beyond the walls crackle louder. Lantern lights glimmer like stars scattered on a restless sea. Tomorrow waits at the doorstep. A rooster crows somewhere in the southern quarter of the city, its lonely call rising through a fog so thick it swallows rooftops, courtyards, and the echo of drums calling soldiers to muster. Inside a damp alleyway near the silk market, a group of washerwomen crouch over wooden basins, their fingers cracked and swollen from endless winters. They whisper to each other as they beat linens against smooth stones, their voices blending with the splashing water into a low, defiant hymn. Did you hear? They say a group of monks blocked the tax wagons last night, one says, pushing damp hair from her face. Perhaps they've grown tired of empty rice bowls and prayers that go unheard. Another snorts, her breath blooming into the mist. Monks? Ha! A third woman, older, with a deep scar along her collarbone, shakes her head. I heard it wasn't monks alone. I heard it was farmers from the north, carrying sickles instead of scrolls. A silence follows, so heavy it weighs on their spines. Her voice trembles, yet there's an odd, quiet hope there too. They say even some palace guards have joined them, that they are coming for the emperor. Then the first woman leans in closer, lowering her voice even further. At that moment, a young girl, no more than 12, drops a cloth and stares wide-eyed. Will they kill him? She asks. Perhaps they will set us free, she says, her voice barely audible. Then, unexpectedly, a fragile giggle escapes from the corner. Another woman, eyes sunken, begins to laugh as well. High, breathless, almost manic. But if the roots rot, the tree must fall. His face is lined like ancient scrolls, each wrinkle a verse of secrets and betrayals. Soon the entire hall is filled with this strange, brittle chorus, the sound of women who have been trapped too long, each giggle a fracture in the porcelain mask they have worn for years. The elder woman pulls the girl close, smoothing her hair. "Hush now, child. No one knows what will happen." The girl nods, staring into the fog as if she can already see the shadows of men and women marching up the mountain paths toward the Forbidden City. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the emperor's concubines gather in a quiet hall. Their hair ornaments glint like starlight in the candle glow, but their faces are pale, eyes darting to the curtained entrance with each sudden footfall. He had believed in the divine mandate of heaven, the sacred power of the dragon throne. He feels something else rise inside, a sadness so deep it tastes like iron. What if they breach the walls? She whispers to another. One woman, once favored, now ignored for moons, holds a fan so tightly her knuckles turn white. Let them crawl and curse. A mandate is mine. A blacksmith reforges farming tools into crude blades under the hush of starlight. A seamstress stitches armbands dyed with crushed mulberries, a sign to mark allies in the coming surge. To offer grain, to open the gates to... The other woman, younger, with soft cheeks that still bear the flush of adolescence, shakes her head. He walks barefoot through corridors he knows better than his own heartbeat. Past silk screens painted with cranes. Past incense burners shaped like dragons. A sharp gasp follows. He thinks of his mother, her hands forever raw from weaving reeds into mats. He thinks of his younger sister, sold into a merchant's house to settle a tax debt. Their laughter spreads like a virus. When he rises, something has changed behind his eyes. He no longer sees a god in golden robes, only a frightened man grasping at shadows. Outside, the guards shift uneasily. The echoes of that laughter slip beneath doors, seep under armor, gnaw at the fragile illusion of order. But before they can shout, before they can lift their spears, the outer gates creak open from within. His robes are patched, his skin tough as bark from years of begging and meditating under cold rains. But all carry the same ember of resolve. In the emperor's private study, an old eunuch stands by the window, watching the courtyard below. He recalls when he first arrived at this palace as a boy, wide-eyed and eager to serve. But now, watching the restless servants scurry with trays of untouched delicacies, seeing the peacocks in the garden hiss at each other over scraps of wilted lotus leaves, he turns to the emperor, who paces like a caged tiger, muttering about portents and omens. A young poet weeps, tasting freedom in the chill morning air. "Your Majesty," the eunuch finally says, his voice soft, almost kind. "Perhaps it is time to address the people." Outside, the rebels pour into the courtyards, their chants now rolling into a single river of sound, unstoppable. The emperor whirls, eyes wide and bloodshot. "Silence," he snarls. "They are insects, nothing more. Let them starve." For the first time in decades, he feels his breath come easy, his back stand straight. The eunuch bows, but inside he feels the last thread snap. That night, as moonlight crawls across the floor like a silent river, the eunuch slips away from his post. He stops by the garden gate, where a small group of servants huddle, eyes wide. "The gates," he says simply. "Tomorrow. Be ready." And they understand. Far beyond the walls, the rebel fires glow brighter. A poet, exiled for seditious verses, composes one last poem by lantern light. "We were born in shadows, fed on dust and rain. Our hands empty as the moon, our songs lost to the wind. But tonight, we carry the dawn in our fists. And tomorrow, we plant our names in the ashes of thrones." In the northern barracks, a young captain sharpens his sword, When he rises, he ties a strip of red cloth around his arm. For her, he whispers. Before dawn, an old monk stands at the edge of a mountain trail overlooking the city. He turns to the small crowd gathered behind him. Peasants, scholars, runaways, soldiers. The time for prayers has ended, he says, his voice steady as the rising sun. The time for footsteps has come. They descend the path in silence. Each face carries a different story. A lost child, a burned harvest, a silenced voice. At the city gates, guards stir, blinking sleep from their eyes. And there, standing under the archway, is the old eunuch. His gaze is calm, almost serene. He steps aside, and the river of people floods forward. Above, in the imperial chambers, the emperor jolts awake. Somewhere, a concubine screams. But outside, 1,000 voices rise. A low, thundering chant that rolls through the alleys, climbs up the tiled roofs, and rattles the golden dragons perched on the palace eaves. Enough? In the first glow of dawn, as orange bleeds into the horizon, a city that had once glittered with hollow opulence breathes for the first time in generations. A mother clutches her daughter's hand as they cross the threshold. A farmer lifts his hoe like a banner. The emperor backs into a corner, eyes darting like a trapped animal. The old eunuch watches from the steps, his hands folded over his chest. The golden cage has splintered. And in that fracture, a new story begins. Not yet written, but alive in every heartbeat, echoing through the palace halls. A thin drizzle begins to fall, whispering across the rooftops like 1,000 fingers tapping on hollow drums. It drips from the eaves, slides down the lacquered dragon statues, and soaks into the silk banners that had once declared imperial festivals. No echoing laughter from the pleasure gardens. No rustle of jeweled slippers on marble floors. Only rain and the slow, inevitable breath of a city waking up from centuries of gilded slumber. But today, there is no music. She had arrived at the palace as a child, a gift from a provincial governor, desperate to curry favor. Years slipped past like silent lanterns on a midnight river. Now, at 15, she watches the rain and wonders if she has ever truly lived outside these walls. Her first memory of the palace is of a corridor so long it seemed to vanish into mist, and the heavy scent of plum blossoms that made her dizzy. Beyond the rain, she glimpses a moving wave of color. Peasants in straw hats, scholars in faded robes, soldiers with mismatched armor, all surging toward the heart of the forbidden city. In a narrow side chamber, a young servant girl wraps a thin shawl around her shoulders. The emperor's banners sag in the damp air, their bright reds now muted to a sad, bleeding pink. They do not speak, but their eyes glow with the same quiet fire. She had learned to move without sound, to keep her eyes down, to blend into the lacquered screens and moonlit shadows. A soft noise interrupts her thoughts. She turns to see another servant, a boy not much older, carrying a bundle of yellow silk. One, older than the rest, leans heavily on a carved cane. Around him, others follow, the silent ripple of bodies folding like paper cranes in the rain. A gate creaks open, and the rebel wave crashes in. Spears lifted, fists raised, faces smeared with ash and rainwater. But as they rush forward, they pause. His voice breaks as he mutters a simple mantra, over and over. Their eyes meet for the first time in months, without the usual caution, without the heavy curtain of fear. He opens his mouth, hesitates, then finally whispers, "They're coming. They've breached the main gate." Her breath catches, not from terror, but something else. Something she had forgotten. Hope. We were prisoners too. The emperor scrambles backward, silk robes trailing like frightened ghosts. While you collected concubines, they buried their children. His lips move like a fish gasping in an empty pond. His eyes dart to the balcony, where the rain has begun to flood the marbled floor. His armor is scratched, one sleeve torn. But his eyes are clear, steady as mountain stone. Once, he believed that Pearl was his destiny. Steam begins to rise from the stone courtyards as the sun struggles to pierce through the lingering clouds. Their ornate hairpins glimmer under the tentative light, but they are not here to seduce or dance. They walk slowly, touching the wet leaves, breathing in the scent of new rain, as if it were the first breath they had ever taken. Now it is just a stone, glinting dully under a sky that no longer acknowledges his rule. He struggles weakly, the silk slipping through their fingers like wet leaves. She presses it to her lips, then tucks it behind another woman's ear. They exchange a shy, almost childlike smile. The old eunuch steps forward and raises his hand. His voice, when it comes, is soft but resonates like a temple bell. Then, one by one, they embrace, peasants and palace servants, strangers whose lives had been divided by walls, now erased in an instant. The boy sets down the silk and steps closer. "When they reach us, will you run?" he asks, voice trembling like a reed flute in the wind. She looks out the window again, and in that single word lies a lifetime of prayers she had once whispered into her pillow, of moonlit tears swallowed in silence. For once, he does not dream of emperors or edicts, but of morning light on a rice field, of his mother's laughter, of a world he had only glimpsed through distant windows. Slowly, she turns back to him. "Yes," she says. Together, they slip into the hall, past overturned trays of cold dumplings and broken porcelain vases. Poets dip brushes into fresh ink, their minds alight with new verses. They join a growing tide of servants, cooks still wearing soot-streaked aprons, scribes with ink-stained fingers, stable boys with straw in their hair. In the east courtyard, a group of eunuchs gather beneath a large stone pagoda. Mercy is not given from above. We must grant it to ourselves. A young eunuch, tears cutting clean paths through the grime on his cheeks, kneels and presses his forehead to the ground. When they rise, they no longer look like shadows of old power. They look like men unshackled. A sudden shout slices through the courtyard. They see the servants standing there, heads unbowed for the first time. "We are not your enemies." The soldiers lower their weapons. For a moment, time holds its breath. Farther inside, in the emperor's private quarters, a golden screen topples with a loud crack. "Where are my guards? Where are my generals?" He screeches, voice rising to a pathetic wail. A single figure steps forward, the captain who once tied a red cloth for his sister. He raises his sword, not as an executioner, but as a judge. "You abandoned them," he says quietly, gesturing beyond the palace walls. "While you feasted, they starved." The emperor's mouth opens, but no words come. "Take him," the captain orders finally. A hush falls. Two rebel soldiers step forward and seize the emperor's arms. As they drag him past the fallen banners, the emperor's eyes lock onto a small jade statue, a dragon coiled around a pearl. Outside, the rain lightens. In the outer gardens, women from the harem step out for the first time. One woman bends to pick up a fallen camellia blossom. At the main gate, the servant girl and the boy pause, looking back one final time. The boy asks, "What now?" She turns to him, rain washing her face clean, revealing the softness of youth beneath the palace grime. "Now we live," she says. They step into the city beyond the walls, into the unknown. In an abandoned corridor, an old scribe sits cross-legged, a bamboo brush trembling in his hand. He dips it into ink, then begins to write. The dynasty has ended. But tonight, no one sings its dirge. In the silence, we hear our own hearts at last. As his words dry on the parchment, he sets the brush down and closes his eyes. When the first rays of sun finally break free, spilling golden warmth across the ruins of the golden cage, the palace breathes its last as an empire, and exhales its first as a place reborn. Somewhere, a bell tolls, not to mark another imperial decree, but to announce the dawn. The city stirs. Children run barefoot through puddles, giggling. Merchants roll up their shutters. The revolution does not end with swords lowered. It begins in 1,000 small awakenings. In each moment, someone realizes they are no longer bound to a ghost throne. And so, under a sky now streaked with pale gold and lavender, the story of an empire built on pleasure and neglect dissolves into mist. From that mist, new stories rise, not of emperors or palaces, but of people, finally their own masters. Night has fallen again over the imperial capital, but this night feels different. Instead of the usual hush of tightly controlled silence, there is a restless hum like the low drone of cicadas before a summer storm. Lanterns flicker in alleyways. The moon hangs heavy, swollen and pale, as though it too has witnessed the decay of a dynasty and cannot help but grieve. Inside what was once the emperor's private study, a single candle burns. Its light dances across scrolls scattered on the floor. Tax records, war reports, poems dedicated to vanished concubines, and lists of punishments meted out to scholars and ministers. His hair, once bound into an elaborate crown of jade and gold, now falls loose around his shoulders, streaked with gray. His robe hangs limply, its embroidery of dragons and cranes crumpled like a wilted lotus. The ink has bled in places from old tears, from wine spills, from the careless sweep of silk sleeves that no longer bear any authority. In the center of the room, the emperor sits cross-legged. Tonight, there are no advisors to flatter him, no musicians to strum his favorite zither pieces. A sound rises in his mind, growing louder. The rustle of silk skirts in dark hallways, the goat cart's wheels squealing as they turn toward yet another chamber. He remembers the scent of peach blossoms, the giggles of young girls chosen for his pleasure, the endless parade of new faces he could never truly see. No perfumed dancers to chase away his fear of the dark. Tonight, there is only memory and the cruel honesty that creeps into the mind when there is no one left to deceive. The children who starved, while he experimented with aphrodisiac wines and spent fortunes on golden hairpins and ivory fans. A mother wrapping her last piece of bread in a cloth for her son. An old farmer pushing a broken plow through muddy earth. A young boy watching his village burn while an imperial inspector counted unpaid taxes. He lifts a cup of cold tea, stares into it as if hoping to find some reflection of the man he used to believe himself to be. But there is no hero in that dark pool. He picks it up, turns it in his shaking fingers. His body, once pampered with rare tonics and lotus baths, now refuses to obey. He crawls toward the window. Outside, he hears voices, some shouting, some singing. The revolution he once dismissed as distant rumor is now at his very doorstep. Rebellion has set the outer granaries alight. Sparks drift upward, mingling with stars now hidden behind drifting smoke. Now, it feels like a dagger pressed against the softest parts of his soul. How his knees had trembled under the weight of the ceremonial armor, how the heavy crown had pressed into his scalp like 1,000 accusing fingers. He had been told he was the son of heaven, destined to unite heaven and earth, to be the divine bridge from millions of souls. Only a face marked by indulgence, by wasted hours, by nights when he chose another body over another decision for his people. He remembers the first time he climbed the steps to the dragon throne, the thousands who arrived with trembling hands, who waited for a call that never came. But now he sees it for what it truly is, a confession of his disconnection, his cowardice, his monstrous appetite for adoration without responsibility, who spent decades forgotten in golden prisons, their youth dissolved behind painted screens. A gilded prison filled with silk and shadows, with soft whispers that promised comfort and loyalty, but delivered only decay. The silk falls from his fingers and drifts to the floor, a ghostly banner of his failures. Through the open crack, he glimpses a surge of torches and pitchforks, the glint of swords repurposed from farming tools. The people he had ignored are no longer shadows. They have become the wave that will drown him. At that moment, he believed it. They tremble like autumn leaves. He sees a frightened boy, trembling on the steps of the throne, reaching out for a hand that never came. But the throne was not a bridge, it was a cage. They had stroked the backs of women he barely looked at. They had pressed golden seals on decrees of tax hikes, of forced labor, of silencing dissent. The emperor closes his eyes. And outside those walls? The peasants whose fields went untended during endless banquets. The soldiers who died hungry while he composed love poems to a favorite concubine's eyes. He sees them now not as statistics on a scroll, but as real people. Their faces burn into him, brighter than any lantern. He tries to stand, but collapses. He remembers the old prophecies that had been whispered in court. A ruler who forgets the people will lose the mandate of heaven. The dragon will curl into itself, and the stars will turn their backs. In that moment, he knows. The stars have turned. On the ground beside him lies a jade hairpin. Once it belonged to his favorite concubine, the one he thought he loved most, though he cannot remember her name now. Once, he might have called this artifact a symbol of beauty, of conquest, of absolute power. He thinks of all the women he claimed as his. He wonders if any of them ever truly loved him, or if they loved only the idea of freedom he could grant with a glance. Beyond the window, flames begin to bloom against the night sky. The emperor turns his head and whispers to the empty room, "I see you now, all of you." A tear escapes, tracking through the powder still caked on his cheeks from a forgotten ritual. The echo of goat bells returns to his ears, but tonight they sound like funeral chimes. In a small chest by the door, he finds an old poem he had once commissioned to be inscribed on silk. 1,000 petals fall in the palace courtyard, but no one hears them touch the earth. He had thought it beautiful once, a tribute to his loneliness as a divine ruler above all. He tries to tear it, but finds he lacks the strength. Outside, the palace gates shudder and crack. He looks down at his own hands. Once, these hands had signed death warrants with the flick of a jade brush. He whispers again, almost to himself, "Did I ever truly rule?" There is no answer. Only the sound of approaching feet, the roar of the crowd growing into a storm that shakes the walls of his chamber. Somewhere inside him, a tiny spark flickers, a last moment of clarity, of fragile humanity that has lain buried under silk and desire for decades. In that final second, he does not see himself as an emperor or a god. The final curtain is falling. As the first rebel soldiers step into the study, the candle trembles, then dies, plunging the room into a soft, solemn darkness. The emperor lets out one final exhale, a sigh that sounds almost like relief. And in that darkness, the empire he had allowed to rot for pleasure finally exhales too. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, dawn is breaking. A thin line of pale gold slices through the smoke-choked sky, illuminating the city roofs and the tangle of narrow streets that wind like veins around the imperial heart. Roosters cry, but their voices are swallowed by the deeper roar of a people finally unshackled. The grand halls that once smelled of sandalwood and rosewater now reek of sweat, soot, and fear. In the hidden quarters of the palace, concubines and servants gather in trembling clumps. A young woman she might have been 16 or 20. Time inside the harem had a way of freezing faces and melting years, presses her back to a painted screen. Her silk sleeve is torn. Her hair, once arranged with precision and pearls, spills like a black waterfall across her shoulders. In the distance, they hear the pounding of boots on marble floors, shouts echoing through the colonnades, the metallic clang of gates falling. She holds a small wooden cone to her chest, the only possession she had been allowed to keep from her home. It is worn smooth from nights of silent brushing, a tiny fragment of a life she barely remembers. He once carried secret letters between the emperor and his favored concubines, messages written in perfumed calligraphy about moonlit trysts and midnight poems. Near her, another woman weeps quietly into her sleeves. Each day he became less a man and more a ghost, drifting unseen through the hallways of excess. He clasps an old bamboo tally in his hands, a relic used to record which concubine would receive the emperor as visit each night. He remembers the soft tremor in his voice the first time he asked, "Will she like me?" The older women have stopped crying. How many hopes had been carved into those thin lines? How many women had lain awake, listening for footsteps that never came? Their faces are masks of resignation. They have known for years that this day would come, though they had not spoken it aloud. One whispers to no one in particular, "The stars warned us." The stars always warn us, but men do not listen. He feels no awe, only anger. And finally, his younger sister, sold into servitude to pay a debt to the local magistrate. His hands still tremble from gripping a farming hoe turned spear. He has never seen a palace before. To him, these walls had been the stuff of legends and nightmares. He screams a raw, keening sound that echoes through the empty corridors. She imagines she is far away, back in her childhood village where apricot blossoms drifted like snow. She hears her mother calling her name, feels the sun on her cheeks. Is it a prayer? A plea? Or simply the final echo of a life that was never truly hers? Among them sits an elderly eunuch. His pale robes are splattered with ink from years of clerical duties. The eunuch opens his eyes, lifts his bamboo tally once more, and places it carefully on the ground before him, as if laying down an offering to a forgotten god. He remembers the emperor as a young man, bright-eyed and awkward. He had imagined them as cruel sirens, willing collaborators in the emperor's decadence. But now, he sees only frightened daughters, sisters, mothers. But then the floodgates opened. Thousands of women poured into the palace, each more exotic, more decorated, more fragile than the last. The emperor's curiosity twisted into greed, his uncertainty into entitlement. That question had felt human, vulnerable, even sweet. "We are the emperor's prisoners, as you were beyond these walls." The eunuch had watched the transformation in silence, fingers curling tighter around each scroll. Now he trembles on the cold tile, listening to the uprising draw closer. In that moment, they share a glance, two strangers whose lives have been shaped by the same monstrous hand. Smoke billows, carrying the last scents of incense and sandalwood into the morning sky. Two simple objects, symbols of a lifetime of waiting, of invisible service, of stolen choices. They chant slogans of freedom, of justice, of vengeance. But here, in this small chamber, there is only a fragile silence. His eyes are closed, and on his face is neither terror nor peace, only a hollow, echoing absence. The ghosts of laughter and music trail behind it, fading into the dawn. She smooths the girl's hair as though she were a child, humming an old folk tune long forbidden in the palace. For a moment, he considers offering them a path out, an escape. But he knows they have already lived 1,000 lifetimes in that prison. Their chains are not made of iron, but of memories and lost years. The tally surface is worn smooth. The characters for favor, summon, and await barely legible. The eunuch closes his eyes and feels tears slip down his hollow cheeks. Outside, revolutionaries storm the main garden. They trample manicured flower beds, tear down silk lanterns, and rip apart ceremonial gates adorned with dragons and phoenixes. Some laugh softly, a sound that trembles between sorrow and liberation. A young rebel, barely more than a boy, stands in the middle of the courtyard. He looks around at the once magnificent colonnades, the pavilions with their delicate upturned eaves, the moon ridges arcing over koi ponds. His family had died one by one. First his father, starved during a tax drought, and his mother, broken by grief. All while the emperor composed love poems and drank immortality elixirs in a golden bath. The boy lifts his spear and smashes a ceramic lion, shards exploding in all directions. Somewhere inside the women's quarters, the young concubine with the comb flinches at the sound. She presses the comb harder against her chest. Her lips form silent words. An older concubine approaches her, gently lifts the comb from her trembling hands. For a moment, the girl closes her eyes and breathes. Then a thunderous crash shakes the room. The last inner gates have fallen. The concubines rise as one. Some cling to each other, some fall to their knees, some run toward hidden passages that lead nowhere. The boy from the courtyard bursts into the room. He stops, stunned by the sight of so many women. Their silks are threadbare, their hairpins bent, their faces streaked with tears and dust. The boy lowers his weapon. For a heartbeat, the room holds its breath. The elderly eunuch steps forward, his bony hands raised. He speaks in a hoarse whisper, "We are not your enemy." The boy's spear clatters to the floor. In the courtyard, more rebels flood in, some carrying torches, others with ropes and iron hooks. The young concubine slowly steps forward. She reaches out to touch the boy's sleeve. She bows deeply. The boy hesitates, then awkwardly returns the gesture. A quiet understanding passes between them. They have both been broken by the same empire. The older concubine, still holding the wooden comb, kneels beside the eunuch. She places the comb atop the bamboo tally. Tears roll down her face as she whispers, "May the next world be kinder." Outside, the palace begins to burn. Red and orange tongues of flame lick at the golden roofs. Birds take flight, startled, swirling above the charred courtyards like a living poem, one final gesture of chaotic beauty before the end. Through it all, the emperor's body remains in the study, slumped beside his fallen poems and shattered seals. A wind rushes through the corridors, scattering silk banners like dying petals. The young boy gathers his spear again and looks at the women. They do not need saving, they need release. The concubines turn toward the open doors. Slowly, they step into the courtyard, eyes lifted toward the smoke-veiled sky. Some cry, and somewhere in that fractured palace, a new day begins, not for the emperor, not for the old dynasty, but for the nameless souls who finally breathe free. Outside the palace, the city stirs like an ancient beast, waking from a long, fevered dream. Vendors peel open their stalls, the aroma of scallion pancakes and boiling soy milk drifting into the dawn. Mothers tug sleepy children along narrow alleyways, while old men slap dust from woven mats and mutter curses about the rising taxes, the unpredictable weather, the price of salt. None of them yet know that the center of their world, the shimmering palace on the hill, is crumbling, that its golden dragons lie on the ground, scorched and broken, that the man who once held the mandate of heaven lies lifeless in a darkened study, a victim of his own desires. But word moves like wildfire. A fishmonger's boy races through the crowd, breathless, shouting, "The emperor is dead! The palace burns!" Their scrolls lie abandoned on the table, ink drying in abandoned strokes of calligraphy. His voice cracks on the final word, caught between glee and terror. An elderly woman drops her basket of chives, eyes widening with an ancient memory. She had once been summoned to the capital as a young girl. She clasps her hands together and whispers a prayer, not for the emperor, but for the countless girls who had never returned. Examined by pale-faced eunuchs who measured her hips and prodded her teeth. They know that by tomorrow, the official historians will be sharpening their brushes, poised to reshape the story. She had been rejected, sent home with a cloth packet of rice in the shame of not being beautiful enough. People pause, heads turning. Some laugh in disbelief. Others spit on the ground as if to ward off bad spirits. He had been undone by himself, by a hunger too vast for any heart to hold. She wipes her hands on her apron, her fingers rough from the daily work of pressing curds and stirring vats. Now she stands trembling, remembering that narrow escape as though it were yesterday. In another quarter of the city, a group of scholars gather beneath the eaves of a tea house. One scholar, a wiry man with long sleeves stained from years of study, raises his cup. "Heaven has spoken," he says, voice hoarse. His companion, older and heavier, snorts. Heaven? Or man's own rot finally choking itself? "Come home, even if only in my heart." They fall silent, listening to the distant rumble drifting down from the palace gates. The crack of timber, the cries of rebels, the metallic shriek of collapsing gates. They know what comes next. The purges, the power struggles, the rewriting of records. In that private darkness, she imagines her sister standing on the palace steps at this very moment, her hair unbound, her face lifted to the rising sun. Some emperors would be demonized. Others, perhaps even this fallen one, might be painted as tragic victims of fate. He sees a boy who once dreamt of being a scholar, who once imagined writing poems to a girl in the next village. But in this single fragile morning, before the ink hardens and the legends calcify, there is an unfiltered clarity. The emperor had not been defeated by enemy arrows or cunning traitors. Then he picks up a fallen vase and smashes it against the floor, shattering both the object and the memory. A few streets away, a young woman sits on a wooden stool beside her family's tofu stall. She listens as a neighbor repeats the rumor. The emperor is dead. The concubines have fled. Others, overcome by rage, destroy everything in their path. A tiny smile flickers on her lips. She remembers a sister she had lost to the emperor's palace years ago, a sister who used to pluck apricot blossoms from their courtyard tree and tuck them behind her ear. She had been only 14 when she was taken, her hair pinned high, her silk robe borrowed from a neighbor for the journey to the capital. No letters had ever come, no news. Only the echo of her laughter lingering in the evenings, drifting like wood smoke across the rooftops. Now, the girl at the tofu stall closes her eyes. "Be free," she whispers to the imagined silhouette. Meanwhile, in the palace itself, chaos drips through every archway like spilled lacquer. The rebels, now emboldened, smash doors and rummage through storerooms piled high with silks, pearls, jade ornaments, and rosewood furniture. Some seize treasures, stuffing bolts of brocade into rice sacks. One young rebel pauses before a lacquered mirror. He sees his own face, smeared with soot and sweat, a ghost staring back at him. He raises his hand to touch the glass. For a moment, he forgets the orders, the slogans, the thrill of revolution. The mirror cracks beneath his trembling fingers, spiderweb fissures spreading across the surface. He jerks back, startled, as if the mirror itself had gasped. He pauses when he sees the old men. For a fleeting instant, he hesitates. He lowers his blade. Elsewhere, a concubine kneels in front of a small altar, hidden behind an embroidered screen. The altar is modest. A chipped bronze incense holder, a cracked porcelain cup, a single red candle burnt nearly to its base. She lights the final scrap of incense with shaking hands, presses her forehead to the floor. She does not pray for the emperor. She does not pray for herself. Her hair is loose, her robe torn, but her back is straight. She prays for the girl she once was, the daughter of a rice farmer who used to laugh with her brothers, who once chased fireflies in moonlit fields. Her bare feet leave delicate prints in the soot. That girl feels distant now, like a star glimpsed through smoke. Yet in these final hours, she wants to offer a silent apology. "I'm sorry I left you," she murmurs, her tears pattering against the cold tile. Outside, the fires climb higher. The gilded tiles of the main hall gleam like a dying phoenix, its wings ablaze against the pale sky. A great bronze bell topples from its frame, crashing into the courtyard with a thunderous groan that echoes through the empty colonnades. Somewhere in that cavernous sound, one can almost hear the final chords of a long-forgotten melody, a court musician's last song, a farewell to an era that devoured its own children. Near the outer gates, a group of old eunuchs huddle together. She carries only the echo of her own heartbeat, fragile, defiant, and impossibly alive. They speak in low murmurs, recalling distant years when they still believed they served a divine mandate. One clutches a brittle scroll of poetry the emperor once dictated, lines extolling eternal spring and undying love. The characters smear beneath his tears. Another eunuch, his face a map of wrinkles and scars, closes his eyes and begins to hum an old folk tune, a lullaby from a province he can no longer name. For a moment, their shivering bodies lean together, a fragile fortress against the storm outside. But the storm is unstoppable. A rebel approaches, his sword dripping from another hall. The eunuchs do not beg. They do not plead. They simply bow their heads. The rebel turns and walks away, the sword slipping from his grasp into the ash-laden mud. A final act of mercy or simply exhaustion? We will never know. In a narrow corridor lined with cracked jade screens, a lone concubine emerges. She moves with the grace of someone who has rehearsed this exit 1,000 times in her mind. Step by step, she passes shattered lanterns, overturned vases, pools of spilled ink. At the end of the corridor, she pauses, turning back one last time. She whispers something so soft that even the burning palace cannot hear it. Then she steps out into the light. The air beyond the palace gates is sharp and cold. Smoke swirls around her, stinging her eyes. Yet she does not look away. She walks forward, beyond the walls that have held her entire world. And as she crosses the threshold, she does not carry jewels or silks. Beyond the scorched palace gates, dawn begins to spill over the city roofs like warm tea poured from a porcelain pot. The streets, once trembling beneath the weight of imperial processions and jade-bedecked palanquins, now lie scattered with fragments of old banners, shattered lantern glass. For a brief moment, it glimmers in the light before disappearing beneath a pile of ash, and crumpled paper charms fluttering in the morning breeze. Their faces are drawn wary, as if afraid the sky itself might crack open and reveal another mandate, another master. But the sky remains stubbornly silent, watching this new world with distant indifference. A stray dog noses through the wreckage, pausing to sniff at a fallen hairpin that once adorned the head of a court beauty. Merchants, who for years had bowed low before palace officials and slipped coins into hidden pockets, now creep from their stalls. At a small tea house on the corner of the Eastern Market, a blind storyteller begins his morning performance, tapping his bamboo rod against a cracked wooden table. Once, he intones, there was a golden palace where the emperor slept on embroidered cushions and dined on moon-petal soup. But no cushion can soften the sting of loneliness, and no soup can cure the hunger of an empty heart. His voice weaves through the street like a low chant, gathering a hesitant audience. Others close their eyes, preferring not to know the truth behind the shimmering walls. Some listen, lips parted, remembering nights when they dreamed of silk gowns and pearls. The silk threads she once wove for the palace delicate as spider webs now trail into puddles of soot. He tears the scroll in two, letting the pieces drift away like dying petals. He writes a verse in the margin of a tattered scroll, his fingers trembling. A young scholar leans against a pillar nearby, his robe singed at the hem from a night of rioting and lost ideals. Each piece, she had told herself, was a promise of survival. May my family live another day. Under jade eaves, red candles burned. In moonlit halls, silenced sighs yearned. Soldiers once so proud in jade-scaled armor now squat beneath the battlements, gnawing on stale rice cakes, eyes glassy. The emperor wept into golden wine, while outside, 1,000 ghosts lined. He finishes the line, stares at it, and lets out a soft laugh, more a sigh than amusement. In a quieter alley, a seamstress kneels before a broken loom. She lifts the length of half-finished brocade, its cranes and peonies still vivid, and runs her calloused fingers over the embroidery. "Who will wear you now?" she whispers. The loom creaks as if answering. She remembers when officials came to her workshop, demanding endless bolts of fabric for the emperor's concubines, robes in moonwhite, lotus pink, and phoenix blue. Her hair is matted, her robes dark with soot. Yet survival had a price. Every stitch had been a small prayer she dared not utter aloud. May this thread be the last demanded. Now, for the first time in decades, no messengers arrive at her door. No scrolls tied with crimson cords. No edicts threatening imprisonment if she failed to deliver. She should feel relief. But instead, she feels an emptiness, like a room suddenly stripped of all its echoes. On the city walls, tattered flags hang limp, their dragon insignias half burned. A veteran, his face marked by an old sword scar, hums a lullaby his mother once sang when he was a child in the countryside. He had marched into the capital as a young man, sword gleaming, dreaming of honor, of perhaps catching a glimpse of the emperor during a victory parade. It is woven from quiet dreams, the weaver's wish, the scholar's verse, the mother's lullaby, the girl's silent vow beneath moonlight. He never imagined he'd end up guarding empty halls, polishing golden statues, while rebels brood beneath their feet. A crow lands on the parapet beside him. It watches, head tilted, as if amused by this ruin that once claimed to touch the heavens. He laughs a dry, cracking sound and tosses the crow a crumb. "Eat," he mutters. "You've won more than any of us." Sweetness must find its way, even in the wake of ash. In a hidden chamber below the palace kitchens, a lone concubine hides among the pickled jars and clay pots. She clutches a small mirror, the glass cracked into 5 shards. Each shard shows a different version of her face: the hopeful farm girl, the trembling teenager chosen by the palace recruiters, the young woman who once believed a single glance from the emperor might change her fate. But with the soft shuffle of feet on a dusty road, the warmth of red bean paste on a child's tongue, the hush of an empty loom in the first morning light, and jade tiles, who dreamed of freedom but woke only to golden cages. She presses her forehead to the mirror, as if to step through it, back to the rice fields and the scent of plum blossoms after rain. When she lifts her head, her reflection is gone. In its place, she sees only smoke curling in the gloom tendrils, rising like phantom hands beckoning her forward. Outside, a sudden gust sweeps through the courtyard, lifting ashes and petals into a spiral dance. It is as if the entire palace exhales one final time, letting go of centuries of silk whispers, sandalwood secrets, and fevered prayers scrawled on gold leaf. In this last breath, we glimpse the truth. A kingdom is not merely built on marble columns and gilded dragons. When a ruler forgets these threads, when he clutches only desire and ambition, the tapestry unravels one delicate fiber at a time, until there is nothing left but dust. At the city gates, a young boy sells sweet buns from a bamboo basket. His voice rings out, clear and unbroken. "Hot buns, sweet red bean buns." He does not yet know the emperor is dead. Or perhaps he does, and he simply does not care. Life must continue. A woman buys 2 buns and turns to leave. She pauses, glancing back toward the palace silhouette, now dark against the morning sun. She bows her head, not in reverence, but in quiet farewell. Then she walks away, her steps sure and light. And so the story closes, not with a grand proclamation or final trumpet. This is the final curtain of an empire, undone by its own yearning. Tonight, as you slip into your own bed-clean sheets, quiet walls, gentle darkness, think of those who slept beneath moonlight. May you carry their stories softly in your breath. May you awaken tomorrow with gratitude as your first thought. As twilight drapes the city once more, the last glow of the sun dissolves behind the silent palace walls. The moon, pale and unassuming, rises slowly, casting a silver veil across the broken courtyards and roof tiles still bearing scorch marks from the final fires. You can almost hear it, if you listen carefully, the echo of distant laughter from the emperor's banquets, the rustle of silk robes brushing polished floors, the soft pluck of a zither in an empty garden pavilion. No courtesans rehearse whispered verses to impress a monarch who will never come. The corridors stand hollow, echoing only with the hush of ghosts who once dreamed of love, of power, of something beyond their gilded prison. But tonight, no candles flicker behind carved lattice screens. Every step feels heavy with stories. A young concubine's secret poem hidden behind a painting, an old eunuch's final prayer offered beneath a peach tree, a loyal guard's silent tear shed under moonlight. Imagine stepping into those corridors alone, barefoot. You run your fingers along the cold jade columns, the surface worn smooth by 1,000 ceremonial processions. Now, just an ocean of shadows and drifting dust motes. The golden inlays, once gleaming in the light of hundreds of lanterns, now gather dusk like a forgotten pond gathers fallen leaves. You pause at the grand audience hall, once a sea of bows and trembling voices. There, at the center of the hall, stands the empty throne. Carved dragons coil around its arms, their scales chipped and dulled. It clings to your shoulders like the softest, saddest cloak. Somewhere in the gloom, you sense the emperor himself. Not as a roaring conqueror or a cruel tyrant. It sees the tea houses slowly reopening, the markets cautiously lighting lanterns again, and the poets gathering under eaves to recite verses that tremble with both grief and rebirth. Her hands move with gentle precision, her mind already wandering to tomorrow's small joys. A neighbor's newborn calf, the bright yellow of an early chrysanthemum, the warmth of her mother's embrace. But as a lone, aging figure hunched beneath the weight of infinite longing, he stares not at maps of conquests or lists of tributes, but at a single hairpin left behind by a woman he never truly knew. But the tender, everyday acts that pass unnoticed, like the sound of a sparrow's wings at dawn. Perhaps for a fleeting moment, he wonders if he could have been more than his appetites. You see them, the weaver tracing plum blossoms into silk, the old general counting the stars as if they were old friends, the concubine scribbling a secret wish onto a slip of paper she will never send. A mother braids her daughter as hair and whispers a story about a phoenix that rises from ash, radiant and fearless. Perhaps he dreams of slipping out of the palace walls, under a moonless sky, wearing a simple robe, walking among villagers. You hear the gentle tick of a clock, the distant hum of the world beyond your walls. The last lantern winks out, and for the first time in centuries, there is perfect, profound silence. You feel the softness of your pillow, the warmth of your blanket, the reassuring solidity of your breath. Tasting steamed buns from a street vendor, feeling rain on his face, without servants rushing forward with umbrellas of silk. But emperors are not granted such wishes. Instead, he fades, dissolving into the throne, becoming part of the same cold wood, the same silent dragons. When you finally turn away, you carry his loneliness with you. Outside, the moon climbs higher. It sees a young girl washing rice in a clay pot, humming a folk tune she learned from her grandmother. Life, in its quiet rebellion, insists on continuing. A farmer sharpens his hoe by the fireside. A scholar transcribes a lost sutra by flickering candlelight. Each of them, without knowing, weaves a new tapestry, threads of gratitude, of survival, of humble dreams. Perhaps this is the true empire, not jade palaces and scrolls of conquest. Tonight, in your own room, the air is still. You close your eyes, and in the quiet space between waking and dreaming, they do not ask you to remember them with sorrow. They do not beg for your pity or your tears. They only ask to be felt, like a faint fragrance on a spring breeze, or the gentle ripple of moonlight on a still pond. As your mind drifts further, you sense a final hush settling over the ancient palace. A silence that holds within it every joy and every regret, every whispered vow and every broken promise, every small, bright hope that refused to die even in the darkest hour. And in this silence, you find a strange, unexpected peace. A reminder that life, fragile, radiant, absurdly short, is the true treasure. That in each ordinary moment lies a small, quiet miracle. That power, when stripped of compassion, crumbles into dust. That the real crown sits not on a gilded throne, but on every heart that beats with kindness, that dares to love, that chooses to keep moving forward even when the road is hidden in shadow. So tonight, may you rest softly. May you greet the morning sun, not as a servant to your fears, but as a friend to your quiet courage. May you carry the hush of these lost souls gently in your breath, letting their longings transform into blessings. And as you dream, may you remember, in a world of endless ambition and shimmering illusions, the most powerful empire is the one you build within yourself, patient, gentle, fiercely alive.